Good morning, everyone. And I hope somebody's watching on Ustream. I really want to see the public get involved in our meetings. I'm Jan Swift, Chair of the Protect the City Committee, and I'm calling the meeting to order. And we'll start first with the silent prayer and pledge, if we can all stand. And the pledge will be led by Councilman Pat Lewis. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. As chair of the PTC committee, I'd like to announce the following. This is a public hearing. To address the committee on any item on this agenda, please fill out the speaker form to submit your information to the clerk prior to the call of the agenda item, or you won't have the opportunity to speak. Staff assistance is available if needed. Items for submission to the committee should be handed to Council Clerk Ms. Veronica L. Williams, seated to my left. When addressing the committee, state your name and title for the official record. The 3-minute rule will be in effect except for our speakers today. No debating or confrontational statements will be allowed. The front row to the left is for media only. Food and drinks are not allowed in the auditorium. Please silence all phones and electronic devices. I don't have any announcements at this point. Does anybody have an announcement before we begin? Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started then with let's see, it's on the back. Agenda item number 3. We requested that Councilwoman Liz Webb-Hebert join us today. Liz is here to give her perspective on the recent appointment of the LUS Fiber director. And I asked that we look at the big picture, that none of this is about personalities or direct hires, but just the process that was followed. And Liz, before you speak, if I may, I'd like to read out what Section 407 of the current charter says about hires and about the responsibility of the City Council. The governing authority of the Utilities Department, the Lafayette Public Power Authority, and the Division of Communication Services, which is LUS Fiber, and its successors shall be the City Council. In the event of a reorganization of any division or function of the Utilities Department, whereby said divisions or functions are relocated, restructured within another department or as its own department, the governing authority of the reorganized division, function, and/or department shall remain the City Council. And then subsection B says, the director of the Utilities Department, which I take as being defined in subsection A, shall be appointed by the mayor-president, subject to approval by the City Council, in accordance with provisions included in current or future bond resolutions and covenants. And so I wanted to read that for the record because I know it's been in the news and you guys haven't voted yet on the budget item for that salary. So if you could share your thoughts and anything else you'd like to share with us.
Sure. Well, thank you all for having me. And more importantly, thank you for all serving. I appreciate this. I know almost all of you do have full-time jobs, so I do appreciate you taking the time to serve. My name is Liz Webb-Hebert. I'm the City Councilwoman representing City District 3 for the record. I didn't necessarily come here just to speak on Fiber Director. That's sort of where I fell in the timeline. So I'm happy to address anything, answer any questions on any topic that you guys have been discussing being on this committee. And again, thank you for serving. I guess I can take any questions that you may have on the topic or any topic that you've been working on. Wow, this is going to be really short then. No, I guess I was really here. I guess my goal is I didn't necessarily have a speech planned so much as here to answer any questions that you all may have. I think historically it has shown that the council, the City Council, or previously the LPUA has voted on directors, approving the selection of a director to those seats. So I think if we're going to follow tradition, why not do it? Since I've been my time on the councils, whether it was city parish or city council, my goal has always been, and will always be, full transparency, putting everything we can on the table for discussion. That way, people watching at home who are currently watching now, people in the audience, or whoever's reading it in the newspaper the next day, can see what has been discussed through the council. So I think a little healthy dialogue never hurts. So I encourage full transparency and full discussion on the topic. Wonderful. Let's
Stuart
hear it.
Grow.
Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you for being here with us.
Absolutely.
I apologize if this is limited to LUS and you have other things that you also want to talk about, but since that was kind of the auspices of your appearance, what is your impression of the way that LUS fits in with consolidation, being a city asset, but being governed by essentially a parish president and mayor, but somebody who's elected by the entire parish? Do you think that not just this administration specifically, but throughout time, do you have any thoughts or opinions on whether how that impacts LUS?
Sure, I'll do my best to answer that question. Is that I think, again, it goes back to my previous comment about things coming in front of the executive branch, which would be my previous life being on the city parish council. It was the LPUA. Now serving on the city council, being the executive branch of LUS, is I think that's why it's so important to bring these things to the council meetings for us to not just vote on, but also have dialogue about and have those discussions. So I think regardless of it, it's a mayor of the city of Lafayette or a city parish mayor, whoever that may be, this administration, past or future, I think that's why it's so important for it to come in front of the city council to be able to vote on and have discussion on. So I hope that answers your question.
Next, we have a question from Ronnie Bergeron.
It's not so much a question, I kind of have a statement to back up what Liz said about voting before. I had Ms. Veronica Poole the last two times that all the times that we've had that the city council voted on the new director. Happened once in February 1988 when, I'm going to probably butcher his name, but Don Uchley? Uchley. In 1988, again, Terry Huval in November of 1994. Both times voted on by the city council, and as you know, Terry was here with us until 2-3 years ago when they put an interim director in place. So just FYI, since as far back as the records go, it looks like the city council has always voted.
And it could be further back than that. That's all we had time. He asked about an hour ago, so my staff was able to pull. And I remember Terry Huval and Don Uchley, so I just had them pull that information.
Yeah.
So it could be directors being appointed prior to that as well.
Okay.
We just weren't able to go back that far.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. What's funny about this is that the Consolidated Council has never voted on an LUS director, so now we're back to the City Council now. It seems like this, all the prior information kind of points to that we've always followed this kind of path. So I just wanted to bring that up and kind of go off of what Liz had said. And another part too, like when we talk about government and good government, we talk about checks and balances too. It's not to see that someone's doing something wrong, but good checks and balances make good government always follow. And for someone else to be able to put a set of eyes on it and look at it, just make sure we're doing the right move, I think is important
Right.
in government either which way. When the city council makes an ordinance, the mayor has veto power. I just want to, those checks and balances I think are important to a healthy government. I just want to make sure that those are all put in place and proper.
And I'm assuming that's why it's in the charter, in the language of
And
the charter.
if I may build on that, some might say, well, we've never voted on a permanent director of LUS Fiber, but let's not forget that it's LUS and LUS Fiber under Terry Huval were together. And then since then, they've since split, but we've never voted on a permanent LUS director because we've always since had interim directors. So let that be known.
Next, Mark Pope.
Hi, Liz. Thanks for coming.
Of course.
So you kind of addressed part of my thought and my question in that I don't recall when Mayor President Robideau split Lafayette Utility System and Fiber and made them two separate departments.
Yes,
I
sir.
don't know if that predated the charter amendments, but as I looked through the director, as Jan read, the next thing where she left off, the next thing is the director of utilities shall direct and be responsible for, and there's 8 items listed, And then I continued through the rest of utility wording, and nowhere in there do I see LUS Fiber. So, but I understand you made a good point in that you said it's, quote, tradition to approve the director. So I don't know if it was an oversight in this new charter that we have, and I don't recall when Mayor President Robideau proposed that, and you folks under the former City Parish Council approved it, but it seems like it's something that's not addressed, excuse me, in this current charter when you say Lafayette Utility System is one department, LUS Fiber is another separate department. You touched on it when you said tradition. So that's my comment, and if you want to pick up on that, it's up to you.
No, I think, again, it goes down to, we can always debate back and forth opinions, right, of what the charter says, because if you put a room full of, the joke is, and I can say this because my brother's an attorney and I love him more than life itself, but you put a room full of attorneys in a room, they're all going to have different answers, right, and different opinions. So to me, again, I think it comes down to transparency, and it comes down to wanting to have full dialogue in a public setting, and I think you can never go wrong on that.
Reading the language at the beginning, if there's a reorganization of any division whereby the division is restructured as its own department, if something
point.
splits off,
Good
you
point.
know, I think that's the governing language.
Yep.
But I know there are different opinions. And so on that note, if I may ask you, the issue about hiring an attorney to have your own legal opinions in case there is a dispute, would you share where that process went when the city council attempted to get legal advice to maybe determine
Sure,
this issue
absolutely.
and
So I
others?
can share where we were, is if you all recall, or you may not recall, during last budget, council members voted to be able to get, according to our interpretation of the charter, was that we could have, a city council can hire its own attorney for a specific purpose. And again, going back to our, you put many attorneys in one room, they all have different opinions on what that specific purpose meant. And if you recall the council meeting, there was discussion on whether we could or not have that. And there was a lot of dialogue, and in fact, Councilman Pat Lewis led that charge, and there was a lot of back and forth reading the word for any specific purpose, that you can do it. And LCG Legal deemed that we could not do that. We're saying, reading it, Pat Lewis, Councilman Lewis was the one saying, it says here we can do it. So I believe last I called, it was wrapped up in legal discussions. I don't know where they've landed on that since, but since then, that ship has sailed. We passed a budget and we moved on. So we've been working on that budget since then.
I'm going to keep on asking a couple of questions,
Sure.
if that's all right. So Liz, on amendments to the operating budget, there's a separate Section 504, amendments to the operating budget, and I'm passing over some of the language, such as transfer of appropriations, shall be adopted by a favorable vote of a majority of the authorized membership of the city council. And it goes on about if it's city or city and parish. But if there are line items that are, money is transferred after you guys adopt the budget, is it your understanding, in accordance with the charter, that the city council has to vote on that? Money can't just be moved around.
I think it depends on what exactly is being moved and where it's being from. So I think it's that question is too broad for me to answer in all truthfulness, because it does depend on what fund it's coming from and to what it's paying for. So I wish I can give you an answer. I think it'd have to come from a situation.
Have there been situations dealing with LUS and LUS Fiber?
Oh, gosh, Jan, you're going to
Where
catch me.
money's
I
been,
can't tell you one way or the other. I can say that there's been discussions about whether or not the LUS funds should be paid back, but I think that's all still under discussion right now with the PSC, so.
Okay.
But again, my answer always comes back to if it's a large sum of money or if it's a particular hot button issue, it should always come to the executive branch, which is the city council.
Mark Pope?
So as I've looked, and I agree with what Jan said, so talking about the reorganization of a department, so how about in B, Section B, under 407, inserting the simple word, Section B, the director of the utility department or any future separate department shall be appointed by the mayor president, approved by the city council. You're covering all your bases. It talks about, in the previous paragraph, breaking off a department, making it separate. So how about mentioning it in the appointment and approval thereof? You're adding 4 or 5 words, and there's no room for the attorneys to interpret it. It says, or any future separate department shall be appointed by mayor president, approved by city council. And those are the kind of minor tweaks that I see as I read through this, fix the charter, just little things that can add clarity. So that's my comment. Thanks.
Sure.
Stuart Brough.
Just to Mark's point, 407A specifically refers to the Division of Communication Services, which was created by ordinance in 2004, and I believe that is the LUS Fiber Division. So when you talk about the governing authority of the Utilities Department and the Division of Communication Services, it specifically says the governing authority will be the City Council. So, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that the council should have a voice in who's appointing the director, or who the director is.
And Liz, we'll be questioning you on this after. We'll have a test on, on the charter.
Sounds good to me.
What I'd like to ask you to talk about, and Stuart, did you have any other comment?
I yield the floor.
Thank you. I'd like you, if you would, while you're here, because we've tried to get a word or two from each city council member, any thoughts you could share, what you're hearing from your constituents, your personal thoughts from your experience about the idea of either amending the charter further, considering deconsolidation, tweaks to the budget process. If that's really what we'd like to hear from you, so that we can have you share your experience and thoughts.
Sure. So I think we can all agree that Lafayette Consolidated Government is, the form of government is very complicated. You all have sat here for weeks diligently learning, understanding. I know my appointee, Roddy Bergeron, has gone back into the books, trying to research the history, looking at the dialogue, trying to better understand. And I imagine you all have put that kind of sweat equity into this as well. And you still have a lot of questions, right? Now imagine the person sitting at home at, whatever address, who's only getting their news from sort of Facebook or the media or whatever it is. They don't have the knowledge you have. Imagine how much complicated it is for them to try and understand while living their lives, working, et cetera. It's because this isn't the priority like it is mine or yours, right? Because they're serving on a committee. I think my goal is to make government as easy and as accessible as it can be for everyone. I want everyone, and that's been my goal since the day one whenever I ran, was I want it to be accessible and approachable, to not make government as scary and as unattainable as a lot of people believe that we are. And I think that's where a lot of distrust comes from. That's why I championed Lafayette Checkbook, for people to be able to go online and look and see how we're spending our money and where we're spending it. To me, my door's open, my checkbooks are open, everything is open to this community. And I think that we should all have that same sort of mentality when it comes to government. Our government is complicated, and I think when I voted to support the fix the charter or the splitting of the councils, my goal, and I said on the record, is that this was not meant to be the end-all, do-all. This is not meant to fix government. If you show me the perfect form of government, and I'll follow it, but there is none out there, is that I felt like that was a step in the right direction for having people better understand where their tax dollars are going. For me, the focus was the budget, opening the books so people can better understand where your city tax dollars are going and your parish tax dollars are going. So I said, this will not be the last charter amendment that we ever do, and it shouldn't be. Just like this isn't the same haircut that I had back in high school. I wish it looked that good back then, but I can tell you it wasn't. We should constantly be evolving and changing, and whatever to survive with the adaptation of our environment, right? When the original Charter Commission was formed, the population isn't what it is today. They didn't anticipate, when I met with the previous charter council, they didn't anticipate the parish growing like it had. No one did. Remember STM back in the day was in a field. Before that, Judy's Inn was on the edge of town, right? So we have to constantly be evolving and amending our charter to reflect where we're at today. Because things do change. That's one thing that will always happen is change. That being said, I encourage you all, I know there's a lot of discussion, and I told my appointee that I give him free rein to any information. The administration offered the same. Our books are open to you learning what the best thing is, and I even told Roddy, I support you in whatever decision you make. I encourage you to not just go straight to deconsolidation or consolidation. I encourage you to look at everything. For me, going back to my original statement of this government is complicated, is that maybe I encourage you not just to consider just deconsolidation, consolidation, but moving it to a next simple step. Don't take necessarily that large leap to that. Is perhaps it's 3 forms of a budget showing that not just you, not just me, not just administration, but the taxpayers, your parish dollars are here. Your city dollars are here, and this is what it looks like here, right? To take it to that next step, to help make more transparent, to show people where their tax dollars are going. Because I can tell you, when you try and follow the budget, it's complicated. And I'm the budget chairman. It's not easy. So I encourage you to explore all options and whatever that may be to help simplify and help be more transparent to our taxpayers. In the end, I think they will all appreciate those efforts.
Stuart?
Councilwoman, are you, pending the result of our report and our recommendations, is a charter commission something that you're open to?
Yes. I lean to, you guys were selected by each council member to represent them in their district, and then 2 at large. This isn't my decision. This is your recommendation based on the knowledge you've learned from the speakers you've had and the research that you did in between those meetings. So I lean to you and what you have to say. Whether I disagree with you or not, I'm open to your recommendations. And I hope that you've all been reaching out to your constituents as well, which I know my appointee has, and I've seen many of you do the same. So, and not just with people that agree with you and your ideals. I hope you've been listening to the other side of the story.
Liz, I've personally learned so much. I'm hoping the rest of the committee will echo this. When you think about public service, which is what we're doing here, but never at the magnitude that you guys, Mr. Lewis, and the rest of the city council, the parish council, our mayor president, everybody, you're public servants. And I have learned week after week, I've got layered knowledge now, that we're not getting information that makes it easy to understand. Not that there's anything going on, it's not easy to understand. And the thing that I keep on rolling around is 3 to 5% of the budget, which is between 20, 30 or million or more, is being allocated. And it's a small percent of the budget. It's a heck of a lot of money. And Lafayette, the city of Lafayette's been cut drastically. Our parks, our quality of life. And I'm afraid that we're losing what makes us special. And so out of anything I've learned is that if we can just recommend to make this process simpler, and I don't know how that's going to fall, it might be a total deconsolidation with a plan, which would have to be a charter commission, but we're losing a lot the longer this goes on. And you guys, I watched the last meeting, and I should watch more of them, but you weren't able to get answers to all your questions. There are differences of opinion, but yet unable to resolve as we move forward to this year's budget. And I don't know if I'm over speaking here, but it's concerning to me to think that we may continue to be getting our services cut in the city so that we have this really healthy fund balance, but yet we have to go to Youngsville and Broussard and other places to enjoy their parks because they are funding their parks. Do you have anything, or is this just a...
No, I think what I would say is 2 things. Is, it may only be 3 or 5%, but if you were to go somewhere, go grocery shopping, and they just tacked on an additional 3 or 5% to your bill, but it's only 3 or 5%, would you be okay with that? I don't like to overpay for things. So I always shop the sales. You know, quality of life is huge. My husband and I don't have to live here. We don't. He's an entrepreneur. I travel for work, but I choose to live here because I love my community. I do recruitment. I recruit people here for a living. And I travel, you know, professionally and personally. And there's communities that I just love going to. It's not because they have the smoothest roads ever, or they've got an incredible form of government, or the lowest taxes ever. What do you notice when you travel? You notice beautiful communities, you notice wonderful parks, clean communities. That's what you notice. The nice people. We have the nice people. We've got the great food. My extra pounds in my body tell us we have great food. But you cannot put to me, you cannot put a price on a good community. People will move here for that. And there are communities that do not have that I go to. And I pray and I fight that we will not become one of those communities.
Mark?
So here's one of those complicated budget questions, Liz.
Oh, boy.
So, round and round, back and forth, surplus funds in the library fund ended up being $10 million. $8 million transferred to drainage, $2 million transferred to parish Parks and Recreation. As best you can recall, is that the only funding that, quote, the parish puts into Parks and Recreation?
Oh, I'd have to look, Mark. You're catching me.
I wasn't
I mean,
intending to, but when
it sounds
you
like
were...
you may know the answer.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. So
It's,
that wouldn't
I've
be-
asked, but
yeah.
I've not gotten
Yeah.
an answer.
Okay,
All right, we'll look it up. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank
And
you.
Veronica can help us look that up and get you an answer.
Mr. Lewis, do you have any questions? Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Liz, thank you for your service and for making time today. We appreciate you, and if you have any thoughts you want to share later, please contact us, and we may be contacting you with questions also. But thank you for being here today.
Absolutely. I'm 100% here for each of you. Please, most of you have reached out to me with questions. I'm an open book, whatever you need. I'm here to answer any questions. My staff has been known from day one to work with you in your groups 100%, give you whatever you need to better understand this. So please call me with any questions. Again, thank you all for serving. Thank you, Councilman Lewis, for organizing this and putting this together. I think, you know, a lot of people are nervous. I didn't necessarily agree with the title, Save the City Committee. I think for us, we shouldn't be afraid of trying to make the city of Lafayette stronger and better. I wouldn't bat an eye if the city of Youngsville, city of Broussard, city of Dusson, city of Carencro, anyone wanted to make their city stronger and better. We shouldn't be afraid of that. We shouldn't be. So again, thank you all for your time. Thank you for your service, and let me know how I can help. And stay dry out there. Have a good one.
Thank you. All right. We're moving on to the next item, number 4. Today, we're honored to welcome Burton Colder and Brian Jobert, who are the auditors for the city parish. And they're going to present information on their annual audit. And we had submitted some questions in advance. And I don't know how you'd like to do this, if you want to go through the questions or if you have like an overview and then we ask these questions if we don't feel they were answered. Mr. Calder.
Jan, thank you. And we're happy that you invited us here today and you had given us a list of questions, as Jan indicated. I think the easiest thing to do is let's go ahead and go through your questions. We'll attempt to answer those, and then they may develop some other questions that we can. And we're here just merely to give you some information. I think Mark had requested some information from Laurie Toops sometimes at the end of April, and she referred an email to Brian and I and said, Mark, contact the auditors. They can provide you with some of this information. Okay. But Laurie Toops had responded to it. Yes, and indicated that, you know, for us to go ahead and give you what we had. We're here not to give you an opinion. We're here to give you some facts that hopefully we can help you answer some questions.
Would you like me to read them, or do you want to read the questions so that anybody listening
Why don't you go
will know?
ahead and read it,
Okay.
Jan, and Brian and I will try and answer those.
Okay. Please explain the role of the audit in LCG's annual audit, how long your firm has had the engagement and the overview, kind of a general overview of your work.
Okay. We began doing the audit during the Durrell administration. The previous auditor, which was George Lewis's firm, had resigned and could not handle it. And this was, I remember specifically because I was out of town at this date, and I'll tell you a little bit of history on it. It was like October the 30th, okay? And I will remember I was out of town. Joey calls me and says, Burton, Broussard Poche just resigned as auditors, and I'm going to recommend to the city council that they appoint you as the audit firm. And I said, he said, no, I'm not joking, because, I mean, this is, I said, Joey, you realize what day this is? This is October 30th, and you're asking me to consider this? He said, I am. And he said, I realize they put you in a bind, but anyway. So when I got back from out of town, we did meet, he and I and Dee, and it was brought to the city council and LCG council, the parish council, and went ahead and they approved us. And so we've been doing it since 2008 audit. So we've been doing it. We've just completed the 2020, October 31, 20 audit, and it's 13 years that we've been doing it, to answer that question. And the audit generally is, obviously we select transactions based on a random basis or based on a judgmental basis that we determine that we need to look at. We use third-party information such as sales tax revenues. What came into the city? Well, the school board collects the taxes for all the governments in this parish and remits it back to the respective governmental agencies. So we compare what they give us in a confirmation to what's reported here. Hopefully all the funds are available. And then we select transactions to look at based on a random basis and a judgmental basis that we deem necessary. And that's how we do it. We don't look at every transaction, contrary to what some clients have told me. Well, you look at all the transactions when you audit. I said, think about this. When we have to look at all transactions, how big of a staff do you have administratively to do this work? And you think I can come in with 5 or 6 or 8 people and in a matter of weeks or months be able to look at all those transactions? It's impossible, and it's cost prohibitive. So no, we look at it based on a judgment basis and a sample basis, and we form an opinion based upon that. Brian, you may want to add to this.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much how we do the audit. You know, if there's some things that we are unexpected based on what we know about the client and the activity in the current area, there's some things that we may look at as opposed to other things. So we're kind of looking at the big picture and seeing what we think should be going on and what really happens. And if it doesn't meet our expectations, we kind of look into those certain areas based on a sample basis.
And of course, it's not bound yet as far as finalized because it's at the print shop, but this report's 300 pages. So I can about imagine why you would be sort of confused in some respects of how this thing works. Even accountants who don't do this, or even accountants who do this, it's a daunting task to be able to look at this information and analyze it. And then you've got 2 forms of government that are consolidated into one.
There's a question about this later, but while you're on that, your judgment. So as an example, from administration to administration, these allocation formulas have swung, in some cases, a lot. Is that something that raises the flag for you to look at those kind of things?
Like on the allocation factor, and I think that's one of the questions later, we're going to go more into detail, that there was a change from when Joey was in office, when Joe Robideau came in to office. And I think what he did, he went in because he was also a CPA, and from an accounting standpoint, he looked at all these various divisions that charges were being allocated on and how they were being allocated. So there's different methods they're using to allocate certain things. Like the 54 split was based on population. Whenever Joe came in office, he felt as though that wasn't the best way to allocate some of those expenses that were being allocated. So then he based it on non-dedicated revenue sources. So it's really a judgment call. We can't really say yes or no, what's the best way. It's more the ones that are doing it every day, what would be the best way that they think would be the way to allocate it. And I don't know if Burton wants to expand on that as well.
Well,
it's really,
I can a little bit. Basically, it's if you put 10 accountants and say, okay, what's the best way to allocate it, you probably get 10 different opinions and 10 different answers. Which one's better than the other? That's based on, I guess, your opinion. But as Brian indicated, when Joey was in office, and I think it was 54-46, it was based on population on some of these allocations. And when Joel came in, I think, and again, he looked at it from the revenue sources, as you indicated, non-dedicated, and it went to what, 78-22 or something like that nature?
Yes.
And then it's been refined every year based upon that same methodology, and I think right now it might be 82-28 or 82-18, I should say, somewhere around that. So again, it changes, but I think the one that Joel did, which initially was 78-22, and Laura and him have just been updating this based on the data that he was using, or they were using in that year, and it is now 82-18, I think.
Stuart?
Gentlemen, just while we're on the topic for non-accountants, what does it mean when you say we're looking at non-dedicated revenue sources? Like, what is the definition of that?
In English?
Things other than like sales taxes that are dedicated for a certain purpose, or ad valorem taxes might be dedicated strictly for road and bridges, so they're not including those types of items. I'm trying to think of something off the cuff. A non-dedicated source might be, I'm drawing a blank.
But like, you have a criminal court fund, for example, which is a parish fund, and it's used to fund the court system. Well, it's dedicated. So when he talks about non-dedicated, I think we're talking about certain taxes, sales taxes, and some property taxes that may go into the general fund, considered to be quote-unquote mildly dedicated or non-dedicated. So I think that's what we're referring to. All these others that are in separate, there's a separate source that it's used for a certain purpose of expenditure, are in separate funds. And the integrity, and I was telling Jan this before we started the meeting, the integrity of the parish funds and the city funds are still there. I mean, they haven't changed that. They haven't commingled that, contrary to what some people may believe. They're not commingled. They can break it out and say, this is a parish fund, special revenue, and this is a city special revenue fund. They're still separate. So those are not included, Stuart, in that computation. It's mainly the ones that are basically gone into the general fund.
Mark?
Just to continue the discussion, I think I can make this statement with some surety. The only truly, totally discretionary fund is general alimony, because the sales tax fund is dedicated to capital, so on and so forth. The ad valorem is dedicated to roads and bridges, drainage. So the only truly discretionary funding for city government or parish government is general alimony. And you guys may be able to add to that.
Well, let me add to it. It is true what you said about the sales tax, but 35% of the two sales tax issues at the city go into the city's general fund, okay? And then, of course, you pay debt service, and then whatever's remaining goes into capital, Mark. So that general fund portion is considered to be quote-unquote non-dedicated, so to speak, because it's in the general fund. Same thing holds true with the parish. They've got a sales tax that goes into the parish general fund. So I think that's the pool of funds that were basically used to do this allocation, as Joel did it. Okay?
Stuart?
But I think we've been focusing on the allocation stuff as a committee, so just kind of want to get the questions in while we're on the subject. So if we're looking at non-dedicated revenue sources as the basis for the allocation tables, would it be true then to say that we're looking essentially at a pie of a certain amount of money, and we're figuring out, based on that pie, how to divvy it up, based on what the parish and the city can afford to pay?
Well, the city generally pays most of those general fund type of expenses that are commingled, I'm gonna call it, for lack of a better term. And then if you look at, even in our audited financial statements on the general fund, it's like 5 million and some change that's shown as an amount that's transferred over or remitted back to the city fund from the parish to compensate it for carrying on all those expenses. Okay, and it's clear in there, it's like $5,058,000, and it was close to that number last year. So that is the reimbursement to the city, primarily for the expenses that it's incurring in its general fund, that they're doing certain duties that are allocable or should be allocable to parish funds. Have I answered that question, Stuart, pretty much?
Yeah, I guess the question is more the pool, if you look at it from how Joey did it, right or wrong, it said, well, we're going to look at the population and say 50, 54, 46.
Correct.
If you're using non-dedicated revenue sources, then you're starting with the pool of money and saying, we're going to fund the consolidated services with this pool of money. And so you're kind of backing into an allocation formula that way.
Could look at it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, and some things aren't, it's not everything that's being allocated based on the non-dedicated revenues. There are other factors that are being used to allocate other types of expenses. That's just one of the major ones that Joey had in there. But the thought process may have been they're taking the non-dedicated revenues and trying to match it to the non-dedicated expenses. So that's, I guess that was kind of their rationale as to why they were trying to do that allocation method.
Anything else?
So from my mind, to wrap around this, to use non-dedicated revenue sources and have the allocations based on that, we've seen how they've changed. So, and we're jumping around, but is it possible on that point, if we went back to like 51 or whatever our population is now, Lafayette continues to lose our percentage of the population. If we went back to that, would the parish be able to cover its expenses if we didn't have this higher 80-20 or above 80% allocation? Is that where we're balancing? Is that what you mean by non-dedicated revenue sources? That's how these allocation tables are come up with.
Right.
When you-
And in some cases, kind of going back to whenever they were doing some of the 54 and 46 split, one of the items I looked at was at the council office. And back then, they were doing it basically on one population. So I don't know if that was reasonable to allocate those costs, being that you had a lot more expenses being incurred and managed in the city portion, whereas the parish has a lot less expenses and things happening as opposed to the city. So I think that may have been some of the rationale behind using a non-dedicated revenue source as an alternative solution to the allocation.
Burton, do you have anything else to add?
Well, the only thing is, we're looking at it after the fact, and this was done by the people who were controlling it at the time, being Joey or Joel, and now Josh. So that's their opinion on it, and that's how they're driving that particular situation. So we're just looking at it and saying, hey, you're allocating it based on a formulation. And of course, they do get a third party to come in and give them some feedback on some of this periodically. I want to say every 4 years, you would say,
3 or
Brian?
4 years.
That they get a third party who's a consultant who helps them with this and gives them various parameters, and then they can select from that. So this is what they're doing, and as long as they're doing it that way, we, from an audit standpoint, who are we to, we're saying, hey, you're doing it in accordance with what you've been directed. You're taking from a laundry list of various different ways of doing it, but you are selecting one of those methodologies. Whether you agree with it or not, that's not us to decide. We're saying, hey, you're complying with what's been done.
Mark?
Okay, Mark.
I'm going to ask about the 2 penny sales taxes for the city, because I think it'll help with this understanding of, quote, dedicated versus non-dedicated and so on. But the 2 pennies, 1961 penny, from my understanding from several sources, states this may be spent as long as a benefit is provided to the city of Lafayette, meaning it does not have to be spent in the city of Lafayette. The 1985 penny said this sales tax must be spent within the city of Lafayette.
And we have copies of those for you. I
question number 2.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
question number
Yeah,
2.
so we can just move to that.
We can. We did make some copies. We got all the ordinances and all of this, and of course, Veronica's office was very helpful with this, and of course, they have it. It's pretty thick, most of the information. We just extracted what you just said, basically what the ordinance indicates and what it can be used for, and so on. And also, in our audit report, or audited financial report, there's a certain page we're required to disclose what's the requirements of the ordinance and what it's dedicated for these taxes. So I have that for you, Mark, and for each one of you. We just made copies of these particular documents that we thought would have been pertinent to our discussion here today. So I can go ahead and hand those out to you if you'd like, and we can maybe look at that particular item. You may have it in the front of you, so I may be duplicating something that you already have, Mark.
Thank you.
Number 6 or 8 in here as well. And the first page of what I just handed out to you, and I have it circled on there, this is right out of the 10/31/20 audited financial report. And it says proceeds of the 61.1% sales and use tax levied by the city, and the amount of the collections this year were $44 million, is dedicated to the following: for capital improvements, again, streets, sidewalks, and so on. And number 2, supplementing the revenues of the city general fund after providing for debt service or outstanding bonds, provided that such amount cannot exceed 35% of the annual sales tax revenues. Okay, that's what they're doing, Mark. They're transferring 35 over to the general fund. This has been going on probably since we've been doing the work, and prior to that date. And it goes on to say, proceeds of the tax have been pledged and dedicated on the retirement of the street improvement and drainage bonds, and it gives you those amounts of those remaining outstanding bonds. And then under B, it says proceeds of the 85.1% sales and use tax levied by the city. Collections there were $36 million, dedicated to the following: of course, capital improvements, and number 2, supplementing the revenues of the city general fund in such an amount not to exceed 35%. And the proceeds have been, dedicated for certain bonds in this particular case. Behind that, you're going to see the actual, and it's just the first page of the ordinance about what Mark just referred to, which we have the 61 issue and the 85 issue. Now, as I said, these are pretty thick, but they're available to you if you should want those, and Veronica and her staff can certainly provide that.
So does it have that language about the interpretation about benefiting the city versus being spent in the city?
I didn't recall seeing that.
I didn't see that.
So Mark, I don't know if there's a certain paragraph or whatever you were reading from, or that you read this from?
If that's a question, the answer is no.
Okay. Yeah, and we could give you the whole thing. As I said, Veronica and her staff could provide you the whole, and you may be able to find this language. There's a lot of times there's discussions, as you're well aware, and said, oh yeah, they should be doing this, they should be doing that. We're going by what we're seeing here. I'm not saying that we couldn't have missed something, but maybe the prior auditors might have missed something as well, if that's the case. But to our knowledge, this is the way it reads.
Mm-hmm. Any questions? Do y'all want a minute to look at that? Do you mind if we just take a moment to kind of read over it? And while we're waiting, Burton, how did you get the audit done in 2 days? When is your audit due? It went 2 days. That's when the new budget
We do the field
started.
work. We're just issuing the report now. We're required to issue the report, Jan, no later than 6 months after fiscal year end, which would be April 30th.
But back when you were hired, this must
But
have
we
been
were-
daunting.
Well, we had to hire additional people and gear up to do this
Mm-hmm.
because we have our other clients that we were already servicing, and we had to add this on top of it. And we were able, the legislative auditor understood, and D&I talked to them, and they gave us an extension for a couple of months, whatever we needed, they said. And we did, we got it out, but it was quite a daunting task. And like I said, at first, when Joey told me this, I thought he was just joking, because I knew Joey, obviously, and he said, no, don't misunderstand, I'm not joking. Becky's going to call you in just sometime today and give you more of the particulars, and so she did. Mark, you said it was on the 61 sales tax that you thought that? Okay.
It's that money that goes into the city general fund. That's, it doesn't say to benefit the city, but it's commingled in a non-dedicated.
Well, it's commingled,
Source
but
of revenue.
remember, there's two general funds at this government. You have the city general fund and the parish general fund. So they have kept the integrity, which they were supposed to, of the individual general funds. Normally, a government only has one general fund, but here we have two, because you have two former forms of government consolidated into one. But they did keep the integrity of that. So it is a parish general fund and a city general fund. And as Pat knows, we always go over this at an open meeting, and we say, here's the city's fund, and it's all completely separate, and here's the parish fund, which is also completely separate.
But those are non-dedicated.
But they're dedicated basically to be spent on parish, except in the case of some items that, especially administration and other items that are spent,
They're allocated.
that are allocated
Yeah,
back.
right, that's what
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not being clear, but
Yep.
that's the 3 to 5%.
Yes, ma'am. And then we do the allocation, or they do the allocation to allocate certain costs that are reimbursed by the parish to the city for them providing parish services. Yes, sir.
When are those two funds commingled? You say they both hold their integrity, the city and the parish.
Yes, sir.
And then it comes down to a funnel of consolidation,
Well,
or they remain.
They remain separate. They remain separate, and then we, in order to present this report, we have to show only one column for a general fund. So in the details, you have parish funds and city general fund, and then we have total general fund for the government. That's what flows forward on the combined statements. But they do keep the integrity, and there are separate sets of books, so to speak, or funds that are specifically for the city, specifically for the parish.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Mark?
Is the 2 pennies, the 1985 penny having drugs and food exempt, does the tax collector and does the software that works with this, is there a distinction between what was collected for the 1961 penny versus the 85 penny? Is that easily discernible?
Yeah, the sales tax office has all of that, which is, of course, governed by the school board. But it's the
Gotcha.
school board sales tax office who collects it. And we do some work on that as well. We do the school board audit. So we look at that fund from that standpoint and say, okay, how are y'all allocating it? So yes, they do keep the integrity, and you know how much is being collected for the 61 and how much is collected for the 85. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Bill Leindecker?
When you mentioned that there were two totally separate general funds, a city and a parish,
Yes, sir.
okay, then at some point in time, is it only like, in theory, that the city puts in 80% and the parish puts in 20%? When does that actual coming together of those funds occur?
With it, like in joint costs, like the council office and the budget department, all those true expenses are all being charged to the city general fund. So when they do their allocation, they're basically saying that the parish is utilizing X percentage of these services of the budget department. and then they're putting in their budget the amount that they would need to transfer to cover those costs that they're utilizing.
Okay.
So then it's shown as a transfer from one city general fund to the other parish general fund, or from the parish to the city.
Gotcha. So that last question on number 2, do any of the tax dedications allow for the city to supplement shortfalls in the parish budget? So I guess in my limited knowledge, we already know that the parish is not going to be able to just pay the money up front, because there's going to be an expected reimbursement at some point in time. So is that okay? Is that allowable?
But the actual reimbursement of costs wouldn't be called really a shortfall. It's just a timing difference of when it was expended to when it was actually reimbursed. So it wouldn't really be a shortfall. If the parish has per se a cost that they just couldn't pay because they didn't have any money, then that would be more of a shortfall. And I don't think we've seen any instances where the parish had a shortfall where they couldn't cover the costs they had. Either they cut their costs to make sure they were within the confines of their revenues, or they made other arrangements, but there wasn't, in our opinion, we haven't seen anything where they actually funded any kind of shortfalls.
Okay, and I guess my last statement would be, at the end of the budget year, I always hear or read that the parish only has X amount of money left, okay, whatever that is, okay?
Right.
And so, I was just kind of, I don't know, trying to get an answer that, okay, well, once it gets to only this, but you have to spend this, then you don't spend this. It just stops.
You're going to have to cut your expenses, Bill.
Okay.
And if I can refer to that because this last year and again in 2020, so 19 and 20, the parish did better. Sales taxes were higher. They've watched their expenses. They've done some things. But 2 years ago, let's say in 18, I remember reporting to this body and telling them we're in bad shape. I mean, it's getting lower and lower in fund balance. But I guess what you're asking is, would the city turn around and give some money to the parish to help them? And the answer to that is no, it should not. And the parish council would then have to cut expenses to live within its means so that the general fund can continue to operate and not be in a deficit position. But you should have at least, I say you should have, a government should have at least 2 months of available reserves. Well, and I must speak from memory, but I want to say we were less than 20 days a couple of years ago. Now, it has gotten better, but they were getting close, and I had reported that. But so far, so good, it's getting better.
Okay.
But the answer to, I guess your question is, would the city turn around and give monies to the parish to help subsidize it? It should not. And if it did, I think I know we'd have a problem with that from an audit standpoint.
Okay, thank you.
And I think the city parish council would have a problem with that, or city council for sure.
Roddy?
Yes, so Mark, with regards to the language in the bill, if you look at the 1961 last line on what starts with shall the city, that's basically the ballot language, it says or for any one or more of said purposes which should be in the public, which I'm assuming people read that as whatever's in the public we can pay for. So another one, the 1985 ballot language says for said city, and you don't see anything about it being in public. So I'm guessing that's where that comes from. Second thing, is the Lafayette, from what I've read or what I've heard people say, the Lafayette General Fund is used as the operating fund, meaning that things are getting paid out of it. Is that true? Like for all operations of the city and parish?
Not all.
Okay.
Certain items that they're sharing, that these employees, for example, may be working on both parish and city type items. That's where that allocation comes in, Roddy. But generally, the items that are not, they're specifically for the parish, and others are specifically for the city's general fund.
So to clarify a little bit, when something's split with the allocation formula, it's paid out of the city operating fund and
Yes.
reimbursed by the parish?
And reimbursed by the parish, yes,
Gotcha.
sir.
Okay, thank you.
Well, on that note, could we just have a third fund that people just pay into, or are you saying that it's not really?
For these combined expenses, and let's say 80 cents on the dollar would come for those estimated amounts, and put it into a third, I'm gonna call it
Like a joint, like a
A
married
joint general
couple,
fund?
like a joint
Yeah.
checking account for a
You
married
could
couple.
do that. I mean, I guess it could be done, Jan. Is it necessary? No. I mean, what they're doing is acceptable, put it this way.
I
It's
guess-
unusual because, like I said, this is the only government, and it may be the only one in the state that you have such a situation with two general funds. Like East Baton Rouge, I think y'all referred to it in one of your questions, but East Baton Rouge is all one. We don't audit them, but it's all one. There's no two general funds.
And they have a lot more money.
They do?
They have much higher
But
millages.
on the other side of the coin, they don't have LUS, and they don't have LUS fiber, so that's a significant amount of money that we have here, which is owned by the city, of course, and they don't have there.
It
They
just-
don't even have a water system there.
Right. My question was more about for the public and for us and others to understand, to have, these separate accounts, even though they're on paper or somewhere in the computer, it's not easily
You could
seen in the
easily
budget.
discern it, you could have it separate, and you could say, okay, here's the joint expenses, for lack of a better
Right.
term, and this is how much they cost, and this is how much the city contributed for that, and this is how much the parish. It's definitely an alternative.
Mark?
My understanding is that LCG uses some national standard for government accounting. Is that correct?
Yes.
And
A
we don't,
national standard.
Yes.
They're governed basically by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, which governs us, and they have to follow that particular accounting terminology, so to speak, and practices.
okay. So comparing, I'm going to say $1 billion business, $630 million operating budget.
That's correct.
Throw in the assets. I'm going to call it LCG, a $1 billion business. How much more complicated are the government accounting procedures for this government versus a $1 billion business which is privately owned and operated?
Quite a bit more complicated, because with a $1 billion company, you'd have one big set of books, for lack of a better term. Here you have like 70 sets of books. Every fund, including the two general funds, all the special revenue funds, all the debt service funds would have to be maintained. That's in accordance with, as you called it, Mark, national accounting requirements for governmental entities. So quite a bit more complicated, guys. Quite a bit more complicated. It's just like auditing 70 sets of books, so to speak. And then we got to bring all of this together by fund types, special revenue, debt service, cap projects funds. So it's a lot more involved than if I just had to do one audit on a $1 billion revenue business. Ron, you may want to add?
Oh, yeah, pretty much hits it.
I only made it 2 weeks in accounting in college.
I know. I didn't make it that
You had
long.
enough of it, Stuart?
1 week was enough for me. Bill Lindecker?
If you could, since you just said it was very complicated, more complicated than $1 billion business, just in your opinion, if you could do one thing that might reduce the complexity, make it simpler, more, provide more clarity, would there be any one thing that you could suggest that might be done? Or would that also be kind of complicated and very,
I think, Bill, any way that you look at it, it's a complicated situation and a complicated government, and it's a sizable government with a lot of moving parts. So I don't know that you could simplify it anymore. I mean, they have it broken out by funds, I say meaning the administration, which the prior administrations as well, have all had it broken out by funds as required. So, you can... One of the things Jan mentioned, maybe that's a way of more easily understanding, especially this allocation situation. But beside that, I don't know that there's a whole lot more that could be done. It's a lot of moving parts.
okay, so
Ron, you may want to add.
No, I mean, it's true that there's a lot of dedicated revenue sources that have to be treated differently. There's so many different things you have to account for. I don't think there's anything based on the way it is right now that you could do that would simplify it.
Okay, so basically it's the form of government that we have, which is causing it to be so complex.
Correct. Governmental accounting as a whole, whether it be just the city of Lafayette or the city of Alexandria, for example, which is only the city government, it is complicated. And then it's further complicated here with this government because you have a parish government and a city government combined into one. And so it's a lot more complicated. Like we're doing the audit on Acadia Parish Police Jury. That's just one government, so they have, it's just like we were auditing the parish, which you used to have two parish, you had a parish audit and a city audit here in the past. But yours is more complicated because you're throwing both of those into the mix, and then they're both pretty significant, you know. The parish revenues are about 75 million, so it's fairly large. And then, as Mark indicated, I think our total revenues are about 600 million when you add LUS. But LUS is a significant amount of that. Yes, ma'am. You had a question?
Do y'all have any other questions? I was going to move on. It looks like 3 and 4, we're talking about it, but I want you to address it again, but they can be combined. So can the City of Lafayette sales tax revenue be spent outside the City of Lafayette? And we've talked about the allocations is really where some of this might occur. If yes, how is that tracked in the audit? If no, how is it verified? And is part of your work to check to see if the sales tax dedications are being followed? I know you've been touching on it.
Yes.
But if I'm hearing you guys, and I don't know if the others are hearing the same thing, it's really those allocations where the money is commingled.
That is correct.
And so, yes, it is being spent outside the city. It's a matter of your opinions on the allocation formula.
But it is being reimbursed, or at least an estimate of that reimbursement, if I might say it that
Based on
way.
the allocation.
Yes, ma'am.
So in 1 year, when the budget's being finalized for 2021 next year, let's say it's an 80-20 split, when in fact during the year it becomes obvious, oh my goodness, really, it should have been 20-80. The city didn't get all that. That's not changed. That allocation formula isn't shifted. It's set for the year.
Right.
And
Yep.
so that's where we've also had some issues trying to get information about percentage of work. And I know it's a moving target, and you can't be in the Public Works Department checking the phones to see, you know, where are they going, but
Right. How many
that's
were
where we,
parish calls and how many were city
Yes.
calls? It's kind of difficult to do that.
because our committee tried to get information, and we'll talk about that later, but it's just a moving target. And so these questions, if you could just, I think 3 and 4 kind of went together. You've given us the sales tax dedication language, but in fact, can auditors determine if that's being followed?
I mean, it's being allocated in the best manner that they have available. She does bring a valid point.
Right. It's being allocated based upon what the ordinances have, or what the interpretation of the ordinances are, but they're pretty clear. At least 35 can go to the general fund. They're not exceeding that. We do check that, Jan. And then also the debt service, making sure that the amount going to debt service is in compliance with the requirements for the debt. And then, of course, the remaining amounts are all put into a separate capital projects fund dedicated for city projects, okay?
Any questions on this point? No. Pat?
Yes, you mentioned that, which we do know that you guys do auditing for the school board, correct?
Yes.
So when y'all do the auditing for the school board and you also do the auditing for the city, is there any type of cross-references that you guys do? Earlier you were saying that there's so many items out there, so many accounts that I think you said like 70, I can't remember exactly. how
70
many.
funds,
70
separate
funds,
sets of
right,
books,
70
yes.
funds, right. But then you say that you guys just, you know, y'all don't do all 70, it's impossible. But then when y'all doing the audit for the school board, isn't there any type of, because the school board are the collectors and they remit things to the city.
Right.
But y'all don't do any type of cross-reference?
When you say cross-reference, we do test at the school board level because it's part of their group of books. We do test how they're allocating
Correct.
on a random basis, Pat, and see how they're allocating it like to the city of Youngsville, or the city of Broussard, city of Lafayette, parish of Lafayette, and making sure that it looks like, based on what we're seeing, is being properly recapped based upon the remittances that they did receive. Again, based on that sample, we form an opinion that looks like they're doing it properly.
Okay.
So there is, when you say there's cross,
Right.
I guess you could construe that to be a cross-reference.
Correct.
There's some verification, so to speak, at least on a random basis, of a sample of these items.
Okay.
Yes,
That's
sir.
good. Thank you.
Mark?
This I'll make a comment followed by a question. I think it's more just a comment. I'm going to make a comment and get you guys to comment on it. I started in parish government in 1990. This has not been made to our committee. This point has not been made. When city government and parish government consolidated, Lafayette Parish government was but a mere shadow of what the city of Lafayette was. I'm trying to get the figures for personnel. This is a guesstimate. Roughly 250 employees from Lafayette Parish government, 1,700 from the city of Lafayette. Take the Joey Durrell, quote, deficit. I don't know how many parks were in the parish back then. Right now it's 8. There are no recreation centers in the unincorporated parish. So we'll go to what Joey Durrell called deficit, doing cost allocation. We had recreation center transfer, parish government, $880,000 deficit. The parish has no recreation centers. So why are we allocating money to parish government for recreation centers? It's almost like, well, if you want to be a member of this club, this consolidated government, you got to pay 50%. You got to pay. You want to run with the big boys. You got to pay your dues, and I don't think that's fair. The coroner, for example, paid in the allocation paid 100% by the parish because it is a state mandated services. Well, wait a minute. People in the city use the coroner's office. Where's the city share? Yeah. Well, no, Mark, you misunderstand. It's state mandated that parish government pay. Why don't, if you use the Joey Durrell philosophy, you want to be a member of this club, you're going to pay 50%. Right. It doesn't seem right that the parish is slapped with $880,000 in deficit, which was, I don't want to call it smoke and mirrors, but that was the government plan. We wanted you to pay $880,000 more. So the sheer size of the two governments when they consolidated is not being factored in. And here in 2021, we still have no recreation centers in the unincorporated parish. And yet Joey Durrell wanted parish government to pay $880,000 more for recreation centers which don't exist in the parish.
None in the parish.
So that's my comment.
Yeah. And I think just recently, this past year, because I was involved, because we do all the other cities in Lafayette Parish as well. We do their audits. And I was involved in a few conversations and discussions even here at City Hall because the parish has basically allowed the particular municipalities, being the city of Scott, the city of Broussard, city of Youngsville, city of Carencro, to basically take over those parks and gave them some money, some seed money, so to speak, and Pat can speak to this, in each jurisdiction that they can use to better those parks. But basically, Pelican Park, for example, or the city of Carencro will be involved in taking care of the management of KSI. And they've taken over those programs, which relieves the parish of some of these burdens, so to speak, Mark. But you make a good point, like you mentioned the coroner's office, I think, and said, but it benefits the whole parish. Shouldn't we allocate some to the city of Lafayette, the city of Broussard, city of Carencro? I mean, it's a valid point, but the other side of it is state government mandates by statute that the coroner's office will be paid by the parish government in that parish. So what do you do? And that's how it is in the other parishes that we audit. They pay for all those particular offices. The DA's office, they fund, every one of them spends money on paying for the DA's office, parish government. The jail facilities, that's another one. I don't have to keep, but it goes on and on. It's just mandated by state statutes. And it's been that way for a long time. So I don't know if I've added to or answered part of your question. Good.
And we all pay those taxes.
We all do.
Everyone sitting in this room and in the parish, we all pay those taxes. So, Bill Leindecker?
And Mark, I think you made a good point. I think that just points out one of the major flaws of this type of government, because, the state makes you pay this, but maybe, the parish isn't exclusive in the benefits they get from it. So, like I said, that's a good point. It's a major flaw of this type of government.
I don't see any other questions. Number 5, in East Baton Rouge Parish, their consolidated government has a series of intergovernmental agreements that govern how the city, or I guess cities and parish split expenses. Does Lafayette Consolidated Government have any intergovernmental agreements in place?
Not to my knowledge, and I don't think to Brian's knowledge either, on certain items like that. But it is a form of doing this, just like East Baton Rouge is doing now. I know it's been talked about, and Pat can maybe speak better to that than I can, but I think they've had some minor discussions relative to that. Maybe we could operate it that way with some intergovernmental agreements in some facets of it.
And Bill?
Yes.
And the next question is, in the absence of those intergovernmental agreements, how are these decisions made about the work? Is it advisable to use intergovernmental agreements? How can we ensure that these agreements are at arm's length? Because it does seem that if another town is involved within the parish, there are intergovernmental agreements. If the parish works with Youngsville, let's say, to clear out coulees and all, they don't just kind of give a high five.
No.
They work it out.
They
Like,
put it
this
in
is what
writing,
it's going to cost.
and they have all the specifics.
Yeah.
You're right. And I guess it's a good point. I mean, it's definitely something that could be explored, because why should we do it with the other municipalities? And I say we, meaning why does LCG do it with the others, but doesn't do it with the city of Lafayette? Maybe it should do that.
It protects both sides.
It does. It does.
It's not one-sided, it protects both sides. Mark?
Jan's got a good point, and we've asked this question numerous times, we, the committee, collectively. So everybody in Lafayette Parish, whether you're in Scott, Carencro, Dusau, any of the 6 municipalities pays, let's just stick with drainage, a drainage millage.
Right.
And if you're in the unincorporated parish, you pay that same drainage millage. Is money used if Scott calls, I think that Ildicon project, which was huge, was federal money. But let's say Carencro calls and says, we have a problem with a coulee, and it's 0.9 miles, which Anson Coulee was 0.9 miles in Youngsville, 1.4 miles in the unincorporated parish. Is that drainage money, parish millage, is it spent in Scott using an intergovernmental agreement between LCG and Scott?
I can't speak specifically to that. I don't know if you can, Brian.
I can't recall that we had any situation where we saw that some monies were being spent in another city.
But they generally have an agreement when
They
they're going to do
generally
this,
have an agreement.
Mark. They generally have an intergovernmental agreement that'll specify it. But to answer your question, I think is, can we use the parish millage in the city of Scott? Yes, you can. Can you also use it within the city of Lafayette? Yes, you can. It's a parish millage. We all pay it.
And I agree.
Yep.
But we just audited, if you will, some laypersons, our subcommittee audited the drainage department. We have a pie chart that says 60% of that parish drainage millage is spent in the city of Lafayette. 40% is spent in the parish. We don't know if, quote, the parish means unincorporated parish or other municipalities. They're paying into it. Shouldn't they be able to use it?
They should. Absolutely.
And that's what Kevin Nakant told us. He
Right.
told us they're not able to use it.
They're
That's not fair.
Okay, now that, obviously, we could look into it, but I'm not, but it is available, and it could be used in these other municipalities, not only in the city of Lafayette. So I don't know where, I guess Kevin looked into it for you, obviously.
We'll dig. Thank you.
Yep.
And I think we heard from Conrad Como that historically, even before consolidation, the money was spent typically in the unincorporated areas. That's just historic, that the towns covered their own. So we did.
That's when he was on the parish council, I
Yes.
guess.
He said that's
Yeah.
just historic. It's always been where that money, when they say parish, it's really outside city
But
limits.
right now, we're spending, according to what you found out, Mark, is that we're spending quite a bit into the city of Lafayette, and the balance is maybe unincorporated, it may be in some of the cities. Which it can do it, but according to, again, what Conrad says, no, they've never done it way back when. They weren't doing that.
Stuart?
I don't know, I can't speak to that.
Yeah, and I apologize for getting off track, but the parish acts as the parish-wide drainage district, and so, which includes all the municipalities, and through the parish-wide drainage millage, does what it can with the monies that it has throughout the parish. If in a year or over the course of a few years it's more in Lafayette or not, that is ultimately a decision of the parish council and how those things are budgeted by the parish. I think where you get into having intergovernmental agreements is when there's not enough money to, say, dig the ditches in Youngsville, and they're willing to put in some money, and you get, because that has historically been where the cities have come in, they say, well, the parish is never going to get to us, so we're going to go ahead and take care of this ourselves, or hopefully with the parish in some cooperative endeavor. And so that's where you get the IGAs with the cities on drainage. So it's, drainage in particular, I think is a difficult issue to look at in this perspective, because ultimately, like the coroner or like the DA, it's the responsibility of parish government, at least to maintain all of the drainage channels that are on the parish drainage map, which stretch from here to Oregon, is that right?
Well, Stuart, I remember having a discussion not that long ago with Ken Ritter in Youngsville, and when they were having those drainage issues, which they still have, but I mean, it's gotten better. But at the time, it was pretty severe. And I remember Joel was in office at the time, and they worked in some sort of agreement, because Ken had told me, he said, Burton, I can dig all the channels I want in the city, but it's got to go in the parish. And if the parish doesn't do its job, then it doesn't drain well. And so anyway, they worked it out, and in that case, I'm almost positive we had an intergovernmental agreement with the parish so that he could get that work done, and they could get that work done.
Tag?
Mark spoke of 60% of the money, the drainage money, being spent in the city. Should that be documented and verified? Because we are told that there is no way they can verify that. So how can we say 60% of the money is being spent in the city?
But the engineers in Public Works has documentation of where these projects are and where they lie within the incorporated areas or unincorporated.
So they would have the documentation.
Correct. They should be able to provide that information.
We had touched upon that, I think, in the course of doing the audit, and like Brian says, that information is available. Now, if certain employees are working on both city and parish, you know, that's kind of an item that, hey, you know, how much time are they spending on either one? They're LCG employees. But the projects, Mr. Catalan, as far as where they are, the engineers have provided us with that information. So that is available.
Thank you.
And some are allocated as well, some of the projects, because they may have a contract to do sidewalks and curbs throughout the parish. So those types of contracts, I don't know how they come up with their factor of what is actually in the city and what's actually in the parish, but they are doing some allocations on some of those contracts that cover the whole parish.
So they're looking at percentages, but not necessarily dollar values, is that right? Percentage
Well,
of
we're
work
looking
done.
at dollar values as well. We had the dollar values on the particular projects, Jan.
Yeah, they come up with a percentage on what was parish and what was city for a particular project. There's just no way for us to verify how much of that truly was in the parish and how much was in the city.
You guys get that information at the meeting? You didn't get that?
I think what we're talking about are the capital projects that are named projects. Our subcommittee examined the drainage department, which, from our understanding, is, quote, drainage maintenance. It's not a named project. It says go to the Coulee Ildacon at the intersection of South Seal Span and Ridge Road. There's a dead elephant in the coulee, remove it.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not a named project, so they have to remove the elephant.
Yeah.
So it's maintenance, drainage maintenance versus capital.
Correct.
Which maybe we'll look at next.
Mark, did they have a log of like these maintenance issues and which ones were in the city of Lafayette or which ones were outside?
Well, CityWorks, which is software.
Yeah.
And we asked to look at them, and they said no privacy issues, which we understand. But maybe we can ask for an analysis of
Yeah.
the City Works, the
And not
2,000.
violate the privacy issues.
Correct, the
Yeah, yeah.
2,084
Good point.
service requests.
Yep.
Joseph Catalan is one of the members of that committee, and I know he
But
wants to
all
discuss.
of this should be documented and verified, regardless if it's a NAM project or if it's drainage operations, drainage maintenance. It should all be verified, and it should be made readily available, not only to this committee, but whoever wants that information.
It would seem as if it would be public information, I would assume. And again, without violating any privacy of the name of that particular person who owns that property, but just the area where it might be.
Right.
I would agree with you at that.
Bill Leindecker?
Right, last Thursday, we had a hour-and-a-half meeting with the Drainage Department, and the question came up, can you track, you know, in other words, it was, the term 60/40 was put out there. And so I asked them, can you track it? And they said, well, we don't track. We don't track anything. And I said, well, can you tell me, you know, how can the 60/40 number, 60%, 40% doesn't mean anything to me until you show me that out of $1 million, 60% of that, 600,000 went to this and 400 went to something else. Well, they told me they can't track it. I mean, that's what they told me. You know, they're also unable to track the movement of personnel and equipment and vehicles and whatever else. I mean, and then I think the CAO mentioned that that at one point in time, they had GPS on Parks and Recreation vehicles, but it was too expensive. Okay, so they don't do it. And so I think that's where Mr. Catalan's question is, to be able to verify it. I mean, how do we figure out that out of $1 million, 600,000 was spent in the city and 400 was spent in the parish, if that's even the percentages?
Yeah, it would seem as if what they told you, obviously, Bill, must be just an estimate of 60/40, but how did they determine that? I can't speak to that, but you're right. It seems to me that would be a way that it could be tracked and says, okay, this crew's going to do work. Is it in the city or out of the city? You know?
The issue becomes is when the project is between both. If you have a line where it's unincorporated and city, the employees or the workers don't know where that imaginary line is to say, oh, wait a minute, I crossed over, and now I'm cleaning out the unincorporated parish. So I think that's where the difficulty.
But they could do at least an estimate of some of those if they were tracking it. Apparently, it's not being tracked, obviously, is what you were told, Bill. Yeah, it would have to be tracked in some sort of manner to be able to come up with this particular percentage or whatever that may be in that case.
Mark?
I don't know if that can be done.
Excuse me, gentlemen, it is tracked.
It is
It's in a
tracked.
program called City Works.
Okay.
Now, and there is a geocode application within City Works. If
Okay.
you hit geocode, and Joseph knows this, Joseph could probably address, I haven't used it in 5 years. You hit geocode and it tells you City of Scott, City of Carencro, City of Lafayette, unincorporated. Is that correct, Joseph?
And that's just when you're doing maintenance calls, Mark? If you're doing maintenance in a particular area, it'll track it accordingly. Okay,
It's
well,
called a
that's-
service request.
So-
We asked for access, we did not get it. Maybe we can ask for an analysis of the 2,000-plus work orders.
Yeah.
There is a geocode function on each work
On the
order.
work order.
And it will tell you City of Scott, City of Lafayette, unincorporated.
Right.
Maybe Joseph could do that for us.
Oh,
Can you do that, Joseph? And just take the names out of the innocent,
Yeah.
protect the innocent?
Yeah, we could certainly get IS&T to look into that.
But if it's just a code, you know, with computers, it just seems like we could get this information.
What do you think, Joseph? You think you could get that for them?
Not from our office, but IS&T may be able to generate that.
Good.
Yeah.
And I know I put you on the spot, but it seems appropriate. Roddy?
All right, so for services that are 100% funded by the city, and I've come to this before in this committee, we talked about fire services, police services. If they're used outside of the city, do y'all track adequate reimbursements back into those funds?
We don't do that.
Not from an audit standpoint.
Nope.
There is, There is a line item for parish-wide fire protection that I'm aware of on the budget and expenses, but we don't physically track any of that.
Okay. All right.
Again, it gets to the point, Roddy, where we mentioned earlier, there's just so much that we can do
Yeah.
in the course of what we have to do and in the scope of our audit.
Oh, I know. Just to give you a little background, I used to work at Broussard Post when they used to do the LCG audits. So like,
Really?
I'm familiar. I
So
used to
you've
work
worked on it?
I used to work with John East and them when they used to go do.
Really?
In Fayette and them, yeah.
So you're a CPA?
No, no.
Okay.
I worked through, so I used to do the IT system, so when they'd go in and be like, all right, let's make sure accounts receivable, accounts payable don't overlap with permissions.
Ah,
things. So
I got you.
We would go in and do those. I did hospitals and banks for
Yeah.
them, so like I'm kind of familiar with some of the terms, and I'm.
Good,
The more
good.
I learn, the more I get lost in it.
Well,
so
that's helpful. That's very helpful to you.
I know enough to be dangerous.
Okay, we've got other questions. I think you've answered, we still have some that were unanswered. Number 7 was, is it legal for the city to pay the parish's bills? And I think we concluded that to the extent that that would happen, it would be allocated monies from
Correct.
non-dedicated revenue sources that are agreed upon through an allocation that the administration proposes. Can the parish run a deficit when they deplete the fund balance in a given year? I think I heard you say no.
Nope. They're going to have to cut expenses in order to make it not deficit. They cannot legally operate under a deficit position, an accumulated deficit.
And then in another question, we were talking about the variances of allocations between this administration and the past two, and they have swung widely, but your firm doesn't question allocations because there's a third-party vendor service that provides that.
That is correct.
Does the audit attempt to validate the cost allocation methods? You said that in a judgment, you might look at something, but typically you rely on that other expert.
That is correct.
Okay. We have heard that many of the costs of consolidated government are paid out of the city general fund. Would it be allowable for consolidated government to establish an operating fund that was separate from the city general fund and to pay the cost of consolidated government out of that fund instead? And you said it is?
It is allowable, but not necessary. But
it
it
would
is
make it-
allowable in our opinion.
And it would make it clearer,
It would make it
perhaps.
clearer, especially for some of the questions that the constituents in this community have. Because I've heard them. They've asked me sometimes. You know, I've heard that, oh, the city's funding the parish expenses. No, not necessarily. It cannot do that. But there is that allocation, and of course, that's what comes into play. So it might make it easier, Jan, to have this, I'm going to call it a combined fund, so to speak, for allocable expenses.
And those intergovernmental agreements where there's no question.
That is correct.
Like the other cities don't just
Right.
bring money to the table unless they're getting services for it.
Right.
Okay. I had a couple of questions from Councilman Nanette Cook, and this is again what Liz Abear was talking about. Is it legal or allowable maybe under the budget for the LUS fiber director to be hired without council approval? So if you look at what happens throughout the year when you're auditing and someone is hired and the city council didn't approve that hire based on the charter, do you get into legalities?
Not really. We'll get a legal opinion from the attorneys for LCG who will tell us what litigation is in place. We look at overview of the charter to make sure, of course, we're operating in accordance with the charter, but this is an opinion here which is more of a legal opinion, and that's beyond the scope of what we do.
Can your firm serve independently as a budget analyst for the city council and hopefully our committee? I know there's been discussion on that.
When you say budget analyst, can we advise you on certain things? Yes, we can advise you, but it's really, we can't give you our opinion necessarily on that. It's your or their independent decision, so we can't serve as an independent auditor and then turn around and be influencing decisions. Can we provide you with information like what I think we're doing here today based upon our years of experience? Yes, we can do that, but we cannot give you an opinion or influence your opinion because we'd be auditing our own work.
Okay.
So the answer to that was basically no.
Any questions on that? So who hires your firm to audit Lafayette Consolidated Government? Is it the city council, the parish council, the mayor president? How are you
The
hired?
combined councils now. Each one of the councils has to approve us as, we work for them.
Does the mayor president have to go to you first and it's approved by the councils, or are they able to come up with their own?
Generally,
Recommendations.
in the past, what I explained to you guys as to how we got hired when Joey was mayor. And then when Joel became mayor, he and I had talked, and I said we normally get approved for the full term of the office. He said, I have no problem with that, but it's the council's decision. They approved it. And then this last year, we had proposed that again, and this time we had to go to the council. Normally, the council chair for LCG would just sign off on it. I mean, he probably polled the council members, I guess, but they would sign off and say, okay, we're good for the term. This year, when it was brought up to Veronica, she said, we have, basically now we've changed a little bit. We have 2 councils. So she felt we needed to have a resolution that went to the council. So it did, and I think there was some questions asked by Mr. Lazard, and he didn't get some satisfactory answers or to some of the questions. We were not present at the time. So he made a motion to go ahead and approve it for 1 year. And then, so we'll finish in that year. So I think it'll be hopefully brought up again to complete the term of office. But it is hard by the combined councils. And I think we've even talked about that, Pat. I think you're nodding your head. I think Glenn has now basically, in fact, according to what I've been told by Veronica, it said, look, put it on the agenda. I'm good with it for the remaining of the term. So. Is that correct? Yeah. So it should be coming up. It may even come up next month when we deliver the public report to the City Parish Council, because it's a joint meeting.
Are there any other questions? Mark?
Okay, this pertains to bonds, and there's 2 parts: sales tax, property taxes. The city, so first question, can property ad valorem or property taxes be used as collateral on a bond sale?
It's a legal question from a bonding attorney, but I'm going to give you my non-legal opinion based on my years of experience, yes.
Okay.
If it can be used as a revenue source or a revenue stream to secure the payment of those bonds, yes.
Okay. Now, here we go, city versus parish. We know the city has a whole lot more revenue, roughly 104 or 5,000, which Pat gave us way early on.
Right.
80 million in sales tax, 25 million in lieu of tax from LUS.
Right.
For a little over 100 million. Parish gets, let's be generous and say 4.5 million a year. Does the parish sell bonds based on their limited revenue? Can they sell bonds? Have they sold bonds? And when's the last time bonds were sold for a project in the unincorporated parish?
I can't answer that off the top of my head. I could look into it and see when's the last time. Do you have any idea?
Information in the report.
But you're absolutely correct, Mark, while he's looking for it, that there's no question the city has much more bonding capacity than the parish. When's the last time? We're going to look at it and see here. General obligation bonds in 2014.
Do you have an amount by chance, Brian?
The amount issued in 14 was
11 mil.
45,000.
Okay. And roughly how long would it take to pay that back? Generally?
14, maturity dates in 30, so it was, it's like a 15-year bonds, those, in that particular case. And if you want to look at it, and we can also give you a copy, but it's on page 67 of the audited financial report, which I think is public now.
Okay.
I think Laurie told me they
I'm
had
not
put
going
it
to
on
read
the
your
website.
300-page report, I'm sorry.
No, but on page 67 is where it's identified. We can give you a copy of this one page, too.
Great, thank
I
you.
think they're all on LafayetteLA.gov.
They probably are by now, Stuart. You're absolutely right. Yeah,
Right.
if you needed it to, as a
Fire
good
starter.
paperweight, that's a good point.
Roddy?
Yes, so earlier on, we talked about splitting up the budget document into 3 separate documents. How would that affect your work that you'd be performing? Would that make it easier, harder? Doesn't matter?
I don't know that it would make it any harder, Roddy, if, let's just say they took all the parish and say, okay, let's assume that it's this way, and here's all the parish funds, so to speak, that we'd have to audit, and then here's the city. And can we still issue one report? Wouldn't make it any more difficult.
Okay. Thank you.
If we had to issue two separate reports, it would make it more time-consuming.
Any other questions? I want to thank you both. I have learned so much today, maybe because I've been hearing it and it's now sinking in, but I found your presentation to be very enlightening.
Well, great.
And I understand a lot more than I did. I've been hearing the words, but complicated probably isn't the right thing. I know we're saying it's complicated, but it's a matter of understanding these non-dedicated funds, is I think what we keep on going back to. But I'm glad to hear over and over that the money that's dedicated is going, I don't think we've ever questioned that, but it's like to hear it over and over. I understand now, really for us, the council hasn't been able to get some questions answered, and we've had some difficulties, but not that anything's been done wrong. It's just, it's been difficult to find facts that we can wrap our arms around.
Well, certainly, it was a pleasure doing this for you guys. And let me just say this, Ms. Toops had indicated and spoke or sent it to as a response and sent the emails to both Brian and I about if you have questions. I'm going to still offer that to you. If you guys have questions, certainly, obviously, the administration doesn't appear to have a problem in us just answering those from that standpoint. We'll certainly try and accommodate you.
Yeah, this was very much in plain English, and I just thank you both for your expertise and your service for our community. We need you. We depend on you to make sure that money's
We appreciate it, and it's been a pleasure serving this community as auditors.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
We didn't clap for Liz. We'll have to call her up and clap for her. I don't think anybody's here with any questions, so we can move forward. We have subcommittee reports, and first we have Stuart Breaux, who is chair of the drafting committee.
To discuss the procedures for drafting the report. We also met on Thursday to discuss the procedures for drafting the report. We adopted a timeline for that purpose. I neglected to email it to Jan or V so she could put it out, but I'll do that after the meeting. Essentially, we're looking at producing a report to this committee for the June 8th meeting. We're calling that the formal submission of the initial draft, which would then be subject to comment and discussion by the committee input if there are issues that the committee is in disagreement about or conclusions that the committee is in disagreement about. Those would be handled at the meetings, and we discuss and debate as to how those would end up reading in the final report. In the meantime, it's a difficult situation because we're a little hemmed in by the open meetings law. So we can't have mass emails where we're debating things that should be discussed in public. So the way that we have decided would be the best way to move forward is, the committee members who, all committee members, please send in your thoughts, particular data points or pieces of information that you think are important to include. We are going to, the committee is going to have a joint document that we're going to work up for the draft together. We've divvied up some of the responsibilities for that. And, there's no easy way to draft the document by committee. So this was just the only workable way, particularly in light of the open meetings law. But we do want input from everybody at the committee, on the committee. So over the next 2-3 weeks, please send whatever you would like. If for whatever reason it's not included, that can be discussed as well. When you have 7 people with 7 different opinions, not everything is going to be expressed to everyone's satisfaction, but we're a committee, and ultimately the committee as a whole has to decide what the report ultimately, what shape it takes, and what conclusions it offers. So the idea is for this period between now and the 8th of June, obviously we would probably submit a draft report to the committee several days in advance of that June 8th meeting so that everybody would have a chance to review and be prepared to make their comments and discuss the draft. At that point, and I'll say this too, I know that we have a finance committee and we discussed the fact that in particular with the questions related to the budget, there's going to be, to the extent that we don't have the final we don't have the reports of the budget committee, whether that be formal reports or just informal conclusions that are submitted to us, we will obviously make allowance for that and not, that may not be final when we present the draft report. But we have a month thereafter from the 8th to the 13th of July, the 8th of June to the 13th of July, to continue to receive input for committee members, to debate and discuss, and if necessary, vote on different portions of the report. We would also like to take that opportunity to give the administration the report, solicit comments and input from the administration, the councils, and also community stakeholders. It's the opinion of our subcommittee that this will help to both inform our work by listening to, as Councilwoman Hebert said, listen to the constituents and what their opinions are, and also, to address, we don't have all the answers. The administration may be able to point to something or the councils may be able to point something in our report that is incorrect, or perhaps that we should look at from a different angle, and that's all input that we want to have, because ultimately we want to produce a report that reflects the truth and gives something for the city council, which commissioned us to act upon, whatever that might be. So we talked about different groups that we would submit it to. You'll see that I just listed a smattering of groups, which is by no means exhaustive, nor does it mean we have to give it to any of them. But just civic groups who are involved in the community, perhaps have people go to meetings to solicit input from them, or even have a town hall meeting or two, if that seems like a profitable endeavor. So kind of have a month to draft an initial report, a month thereafter to refine and finalize that report with input from the public, and then ultimately submit the report to this committee on the 13th of July for adoption. The timeline does not take us through the full time frame that was set by the City Council, which is, I believe, we have another month into August. So we think that this is a realistic time frame, but if for whatever reason we need to go further, there's ample time to push this back. We won't be knocking on the deadline on the 13th. So there's some cushion built in there for if necessary. We didn't really get into a detailed outline, just more of grouping the questions that we've been tasked with responding to in kind of a way that made sense. Grouping, there's kind of a group that is budget questions more specific about how the tax dollars are spent and protecting the taxpayers, questions about how consolidated services are paid for, and then there are conclusions about how the city council can protect the city, questions about whether consolidation has lived up to its promises and whether it's fair or results in a fair form of government. And then ultimately, a couple of the questions dealt with deconsolidation. So bearing the lead, that would be the final section of the report, or to take up additionally potential charter amendments that short of deconsolidation, that may be wise. Again, we haven't reached any conclusions, obviously, and we will, that's something for the committee to debate. But we have kind of an outline. We've divvied up how we're going to handle that workload in getting the initial report to this committee, and set up a time frame for doing so. Obviously, we're open to any other suggestions that anyone may have, or comments, concerns, and we'll go from there.
Stuart, for our next meeting, you know, what we'd looked at initially was conclusions and discussion of recommendations. Did you guys discuss, have we hit on the topics, or at least tried to get information that answer the 14 questions? Are you at that point to say, I haven't studied it, I hate to say it, I don't know that we've gotten everything we hoped to get. We have attempted to get a lot of information.
Yeah. I think we've gotten information that touches on everything. My concern before this meeting was about LUS, because we haven't specifically had anybody come and talk about LUS specifically and how it fits within consolidation. One of the questions specifically was how the city council can best protect ratepayer-owned Lafayette utility system. Not sure that we have enough there through information given to us to make that determination. Although, to a certain extent, how to protect the ratepayers is kind of the same question as how to protect the city of Lafayette taxpayers, just more of a sub-question, I suppose. So I guess the extent to which we want to focus on LUS, if there are specific concerns that we want to address, then I would recommend that we have a meeting or a speaker or two who can come and talk to us about that and solicit additional information. I'd also say, like the budget, if we don't have that in time for the 8th, the goal is not to put out a final product on the 8th. If we have to say the LUS portion will be, distributed to the committee a week later, 2 weeks later, that's not a big deal. There's some flexibility there. So to answer your question, that would be the only thing that we don't have specific information on. I would add that again, that there's some work going on with the budget that, of course, we would wait on that before really finalizing anything on those matters.
I think Pat wanted to make a comment.
Yes, I had a conversation with Andrew Duyon. He's a former employee with LUS. I think he was in accounting back there. But he has no problem. He doesn't have a problem. He would love to come and give some insight about LUS and LUS fiber. So just want to let you guys know that he okay with it.
I think we should get him to come speak. I can request it. Can we
Yes.
discuss this? If it wasn't on the agenda, it's just, new business, but I think that would
Okay.
give us a lot more to work from. We mentioned today about the hiring without the city council voting on it.
Correct.
And I guess Andrew really has the whole background of
Yes.
not only the LUS, but the creation of the
Sure.
fiber.
So Joseph can reach out to him or Veronica, if it's okay with you guys.
And I would add that I don't know if he's available or, but that Don Bertrand had done a lot of work on the LPUA when he was on the City Parish Council. He might be someone else who could shed some historical light on that as well.
What do you think about that, Pat?
Yeah.
Don Bertrand? Okay. I have a question about the report. I know we have a question from Mark too, but let's say that, you know, it does sound very difficult to write something by committee and to get input without violating rules. Let's say that we get a majority vote that we accept the report as finalized, and then we have people that may not agree with the recommendations. You know, I picture this like a Supreme Court opinion where you could have, I don't know what you guys think about this, but if there's someone that disagrees in particular with a point or two, to give their input, even though it doesn't affect the vote, this is our report. But somebody, and it could be me, I don't know, but if there's something in it that I don't agree with, I don't have experience working on this type of a public report. You know, I typically want to see a committee agree. I don't know that we'll have 7 agreeing on everything. I don't know that. I haven't polled the committee, but do you have any thoughts on that as to how that might shake out?
I mean, my initial thought is that any member of the committee is a member of the public who is, you know, has a voice and can express whatever conclusions that they want to express. I think that you know, we're a committee and we're being asked to answer specific questions and deliver those to the council. If you present, you know, a document that, you know, has all kinds of footnotes or separate documents that are, you know, we're supposed to submit something with one voice. To the extent that that voice does not resonate with every member of the committee, nothing is stopping them from exercising any of their political freedoms to express a contrary opinion. But I think that if the committee, our document has a lot less force if it's, you know, here's what 5 people thought, and here's what 1 person thought, and here's what 1 person thought, or here's what somebody thought about this. And I mean, I think we're supposed to answer questions and give an answer that is definite to the extent that it can be, and not contingent.
Why don't we take it under advisement? We are a committee. And,
Yeah, I would say
you
that there's
know,
ample time for that, and,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, we are a committee, and I want to make sure we work as a committee and, you know, have voices heard. And hopefully, the drafting committees can do such a bang-up job, you know, there won't be anything to disagree with. But I don't envy that task. It's going to be a lot to pull this together. Mark?
Just a quick response. I like Jan's idea. I think with some limitations, you know, you can't just say what you think. I mean, if there are differing opinions, 2 or 3 from the vote, if we do have a vote, I think that with some limitations on what somebody could submit, I think it would be a good idea, because I've heard from numerous council members, we want every thought, every idea. It's not so much that we have a punch, and I do think we need to meet with the public. Personally, I think here we're going to put these folks out, the council staff, but I think we ought to have a couple of public hearings at 5-ish, 5:30 on whatever day, and try to publicize it as far ahead as we possibly can. You know, the South Side Library is fine, but what about the folks on the north side? Are they going to drive from the north side to the south side? This is more of a central location. I just think July is overly ambitious. The 14 questions, I got some questions on the questions. I'm not ready to address the questions. I need clarification on how can the city council best protect the ratepayer-owned Lafayette utility system. Protect it from what? What is threatening it? That would be my question right off the bat. And I've got other questions in there. Like I said, I have questions on the questions. We got a response today from our auditor. are city tax dollars being spent outside the city limits of Lafayette? I took away a conclusive no. I don't know about you folks, but that's what I took. So that one's that's low-hanging fruit. Don't have any question on that question. Is consolidation fair to the city of Lafayette taxpayers? I just have questions on the questions before I'm able to come up with my opinion. I'm not ready to offer my opinion right now. I know a good bit, but I've got a good bit more to learn. I don't know about you folks, the other folks on the committee. So that's where I am. I think when I did the math told me our 6 months ends in September. We started, I believe, I'm going from memory, March 27th. So.
Starts on the date of appointment, February.
Okay. Well, whatever the case may be, I don't, and what are we here? We've got one more meeting in April. So I'm just saying, I think we've got more to learn. That's my input.
Thank you. And I think we will have differing opinions, because I heard something totally different from the auditors. Just that was me, about through the allocation that city monies are spent. That's what I heard. So I'm looking forward to having more discussion where we get feedback. So, okay. So we will then, Joseph, we'll reach out to those 2 potential speakers for our next meeting. And then any other comments on the drafting committee? Okay. And you'll send us that today? Okay. Let's see. Okay, Mark, we have an update from the Finance Subcommittee from Mark Pope.
And so my apologies to my fellow subcommittee members and to the committee as a whole, being kind of the first bite at the apple in this whole committee thing. So we're at that point, if Bill and Tag, and that's kind of like Stuart said, we're kind of hamstrung with what we can do. With the report, let me say this. Our meeting was an hour and a half simply for time limitations on the meeting room. We needed at least another hour. We needed at least another hour. There were some good questions asked. Bill, I didn't want to comment when the auditors were here, but the way I remembered your question was you were asking about cars, tracking the cars. The equipment should be, fairly easy if we can eventually get those CityWorks projects. Personally, I would like to submit what we have with the addition of what Tag and Bill want to add from what they got from the report. What you saw was a bunch of numbers. I hope it didn't make your head swim too much. That was, I did okay in accounting because my brother's an accountant and he tutored me. But and I didn't go to him and say, help me with this. I rounded up those numbers. I said, we need to understand this budget. We need to understand the funds. And that's but a start. The 3 funds you saw are what is used for the drainage budget. And my question still remains, of that funding, of that $14,700,000, I'm gonna kick that dead horse until it responds. Was any money spent in Scott, Carencro, Dusson, Youngsville? I don't know if that will come out for this report, but it's what we need to understand. Everybody pays it. Shouldn't everybody get a bite at the apple? If Carencro has a drainage issue, shouldn't they be able to use the funds that they pay into the drainage millage? I think so. So page 1 was an overview, pretty straightforward. Page 2 was a continuation of the numbers, and then the conclusion. And I'm not sure if Bill or Tag have any financial analysis. Look, I can pull the thing that I did for the average cost Somebody told me they didn't think it was factual. It's the closest we're going to get to seeing what each of these drainage maintenance projects costs. So that's why I put that in there. And believe me, I use CityWorks, and you do have duplications. There's no doubt about it. Once you start a department or a division and LCG starts, you will have duplications in CityWorks. And Brian Smith, the gentleman who's the director of the drainage department, told us there will be a transfer of drainage maintenance problems to Public Works, as is stated in the report. Then they go from a maintenance project to a capital project. If you want me to pull that out, I'll pull it out. It's an estimate. I think it's reasonable, and it's the closest we're going to get to what does one of these projects cost. And it's an average, of course. You might have one that costs $10,000 and another that costs $3,000. Well, you divide by 2, you're going to get an average of $5,000. So I will get, can we, how does that work? Do I have to send, we're not a quorum, and so now we're going to discuss our report. So are we at liberty? I don't know if Tag and Bill have time, or do we just need to?
We have a quorum here. And
Well,
what
we
I'd
do
like-
now.
Yeah, what I'd like to say, Mark, is I don't even know yet what their questions were because they didn't get to see the report before I sent it out. So
I sent
I
it-
apologize for
Right.
sending it. I assumed that it was a group project. So what I'd like to do is give them, their next in the queue, let them give their thoughts, and then we might have a better idea of where they stand. Because I haven't, I don't know. I just know that I sent it out thinking it was a subcommittee report. So I think we can talk about this, Joseph. We've got a quorum, we're talking publicly.
Good.
So I'm going to let, if you don't mind, I'm going to let Bill go next, and then Tag, and then y'all can maybe have a better idea of where you stand on the report.
Okay. I have something prepared, and I guess on just the general operating procedure of our finance subcommittee. I was never offered the opportunity to submit questions for the drainage meeting. I never received an email or a verbal, hey, would you like to submit these questions? Whenever we spoke on the phone one time, I was told that it'd be better if I could just ask the questions within the context of what you had prepared and created as the discussion progressed, okay? You mentioned to me once that I was interested in vehicle use, and those questions would probably be answered in the context. On Monday, May the 3rd, we met at the Public Main Library, and you gave me the questions prepared and pages of the budget that you had selected. Again, there was no offer to have my questions included in the document, nor was there an offer to include any additional budget pages. At the meeting with drainage, I voiced my concern to place time parameters on the scope of the questions and discussion of the meeting. I asked Mr. Gordon Wiltz if, with his experience, if that might be a good idea to set some time parameters so that all committee members would have time to ask questions. He said his experience in meetings might be a good idea. When you came in, I voiced my suggestion, 45 minutes for, your packet, 15 minutes for me, 15 minutes for Mr. Catalon. And again, you kind of declined, saying our questions would probably be answered within the scope of your questions, or we could ask when we discuss a particular budget line item. The document used for the meeting was solely and exclusively prepared by you. I was never offered the opportunity to contribute, review, modify, or approve the Finance Subcommittee document on the meeting with drainage that was submitted to Chairperson Jan Swift. So with that being said, I certainly hope that we can move to a more inclusive type of document creation process as opposed to what we had the first time, which was you prepare, this is how we're going to do it, and we'll go from there. The way I remember the meeting starting was we were going line by line through the drainage budget, and after about 45 minutes, Mr. Catalan asked a series of questions. The representatives from Public Works and Drainage were unable to answer his questions. Perhaps if Mr. Catalan's questions had been included in the meeting agenda, he might have received his answers. After about an hour or so, I interjected that because the vast amount of money in the Drainage Department budget was parish money, I'd like to kind of move on, okay? In the document that was submitted, first of all, I asked the Drainage Department if they could track employees, vehicles, equipment, materials, and link them to a job site. Now, their response, to my recollection, was they could not. There was no way to accurately track the movement and use of resources. So, no tracking method to verify if the work was done with or within or outside the city of Lafayette city limits. The Director of Public Works said he almost always outsources his work orders. On occasion, he might ask drainage to handle a smaller job. There is no tracking method to verify if this smaller job was done within the city limits or outside the city limits. Their comments, not mine. The Director of Drainage said that when he receives requests from citizens, his only concern is getting the job completed, not tracking the location of the job, the use of personnel, vehicles, machinery, or materials. We talked a little bit about Fund 401. It's a city sales tax fund. In the 2021 budget, $832,300 is allocated for city capital expenditures. The Director of Public Works said this money can be used for vehicles, machinery, equipment, materials. He also stated that all of these items could be used anywhere in the parish and that no restrictions tracking were placed on them. The Director of Drainage stated that when he needs something, he doesn't make sure that equipment purchased with City of Lafayette dollars is used only in the city. He just gets the job done. I do not remember discussing any items under the heading of percentage of expenditures by specific account. I think you failed to mention that 60% of parish taxes in your report are paid by residents of the City of Lafayette. There is no evidence, proof that the City of Lafayette residents receive 60% of the benefits. I asked that question. I needed to know dollar amounts, and at that meeting, they could not give them to me. You also failed to mention that the City of Lafayette residents pay twice, once through parish-wide property taxes and once through Fund 401. No other municipality does that. There was some discussion related to the percentage of drainage requests from inside the City of Lafayette and outside the city. 1,200 came from within, 800 from outside the city limits. It was also mentioned that many could be duplicates. The ratio was 60-40. I commented that 60-40, again, doesn't really mean anything to me. One job in the parish could cost as much as 10 or 20 jobs in the city. Again, Drainage and Public Works said they do not track. Our meeting, as far as I'm concerned, did not include anything close to conclusions. Conclusions are, to me, not relevant when reporting the items discussed in a meeting. It is obvious from examining the budget that most of the Drainage Department budget is derived from parish money, money that all parish property owners must pay. 60% of that money comes from City of Lafayette taxpayers. It's also obvious that one-time money and tax rededications have been used to increase the flow of revenue into drainage. It appears that present funding sources for the Drainage Department are inadequate. The subcommittee was not given any proof that 60% of work orders for drainage maintenance in the City of Lafayette was for work in the City of Lafayette. nor were we given any proof that 40% of the work orders for drainage maintenance was for work performed in the parish of Lafayette. The committee did not receive any proof that the residents of the city of Lafayette derived benefit from city sales tax fund. The subcommittee was not given any proof that equipment purchased with the Fund 401 money was exclusively used in the city. I do not remember the committee ever discussing a closer to reality 1900 service requests. I do not remember the committee ever discussing an average cost per service request, including capital outlay, or an average cost when excluding capital outlay. My last statement was, again, I need to review the audio recording again, but I understand that that is not available. So those are just some of my thoughts about what I took away from the meeting, and certainly we can discuss those.
There's no recording of the meeting available?
Yeah, there is. Did it work, Judge? I did what you told me twice. Pulled it down. I hit record. There's nothing on there? There was nothing. No file on it at all. I remembered it about 5 minutes in. Go, oh, record. There was a file the next day for the drafting subcommittee. Finances of the drainage department. I knew that the meeting, that would take more than an hour and a half. I knew we were going to be short. If you recall, I scrambled to get in the questions on that second page and I didn't get an answer. And I tried to include you guys as much as possible. It would be easy, Bill, to infer that I tried to shut you guys out during the meeting. I did not. I recall asking on at least one occasion to both of you, Tag, you have another question? Bill, you got something? When you guys responded. I apologize for your feeling slighted, but I knew addressing this complex issue was going to take longer than an hour and a half, and we simply would not have time.
Mark, in the interest of time, Tag had some comments also, and so I'd like you to be able to respond, but I want us to be able
Sure.
to respond.
Well, I don't know what to do other than to include Bill's entire report. I don't know what to
Well,
incorporate from there.
let's hear from
Sure.
Tag,
Go
and then
ahead,
we'll.
Tag.
These are my thoughts. We did not receive the information that we sought. I am concerned that the administration may be making it difficult to obtain relevant information in a timely fashion. Key administrators may be unavailable, or time restrictions are placed on meetings. I am troubled by the recent introduction of legal opinions into committee efforts to acquire information. I am puzzled by the CAO's attendance at the recent financial subcommittee meeting with drainage. Will the CAO attendance at subsequent meetings be mandatory, and why? If the current trend continues, this will lead the committee to submit a report that is inconclusive, which leads to more questions and doubts about this current consolidated government. In the compilation of the final report, attention may be drawn to the fact that the present administration is doing what it does best, and that is supporting consolidated government in favor of the parish and unincorporated areas, and not attending to the needs of the taxpaying citizens of the city of Lafayette. Fellow committee members, let's not play the game that the administration is playing. Let's move above and beyond their efforts to compromise the work of the committee. We need factual information. Mark, I may suggest that in the future, you give us all a chance to submit our questions. You submit them, let's do everything above board, and if we don't get an answer, well, then that's in the report. Like I stated earlier, we will just have an inclusive report. But at least we asked. The administration did not give, or they made it very difficult for us to get that information. I also have a concern on your report on page 2. I understand that this is an estimate amount of money that it takes for funds to do drainage work.
You mean page
But-
3?
Well, page 2.
Go ahead, sorry.
But what happens here is that those are your figures. Those are not facts. We want figures from the people who are responsible for doing the work. I have heard that this administration, through its executive officer, say that consolidated government is being run like a business. Well, a business is for profit. Government is not. If we are running this consolidated government as a business, then there's a profit. The parish should not be broke. Where's that money? Those are my comments.
All right, so Mark, before you comment, I want to ask, so I can make sure I understand. I know Mark spent a lot of time on this. From the words I heard, this does not reflect what happened in the meeting as far as you remember. We don't have a tape recording of the meeting to go back and listen to it. Do you have specific suggestions? And then we'll let Mark respond as to how to compile a report based on at least the information you were given. I know that there's still information out that you'd like to get, and I think we should follow up with the appropriate people to say we were still trying to get this information, and we understand there may be ways to get it. Am I hearing you right, that you didn't get enough to reach conclusions because you weren't given all the facts?
As far as I'm concerned, the whole hour and a half spent at Public Works was just an academic exercise.
Bill?
We didn't get anything out of it other than what's in Mark's report, and this is what he did on his own, the figures and what have you. The director of Public Works told me when I asked him questions concerning the projects versus just drainage 9 million and listen to projects, he told me to go buy a book for $150. What's the name of that book, Bill?
Yeah, I don't know, but it was quite a...
And that the city council would have it. I mean, what kind of response is that to taxpaying citizens? He wanted us to spend our money. He didn't have the courtesy to answer our questions.
So Mark, I'm going to let you speak now. Where did these numbers come from?
As memory can sometimes fail us, I said that, Tank.
No, you didn't.
That, no,
No, you didn't, Mark.
okay, I'm not going to get
I
in an...
specifically remember because it rubbed me the wrong way.
I don't know that Brian and Chad know that the budget book is $150.
Well, they said.
Maybe they did say it.
He rubbed me the wrong way
I-
out of courtesy and respect to the administration, which we are not getting back from the administration.
I hear you, I
He said
agree that...
$150, and it rubbed me the wrong way, but I commented no more other than to conclude that this guy does not want us in his office.
Maybe he said that, but I also said it for the simple fact, when he was digging for the capital side of the book, I said, yeah, there's a lot in that book, but the problem is, the books are $150, we can't all just get one. And I said that, so, look, that's kind of beside the point. Look, I do hear what you're saying. Where did it come from? Which question did you ask?
I was asking did you go back to the budget itself? Like,
Yeah.
where did you get these numbers?
It's,
If they didn't give
yes,
them
I
to
went
you?
back to the budget.
So they
and-
didn't give you this information?
Of
You
course they did.
They
In
did?
the 3 pages. And Tag said, where's the other part of the budget, meaning public work? Guys, we didn't have time to do any more than the 3-page, $14 million drainage budget.
So they gave you papers that had these numbers on it?
Yes,
And where are those papers?
in the budget book.
So-
Right, they didn't give us, when we walked into the meeting, they didn't supply us.
Well, it was the same thing, Bill. It was pages 206, 207, 208, which I gave to you and Tag on Monday. That's why I gave it to you,
but they
for
didn't-
you to study
They
it.
didn't give us that at the meeting. We came with that. You.
Okay.
You picked out those pages.
Yeah, it seems as though, and look, I'm just going to make a statement. It seems as though from you guys' critique that I did a very poor job. I apologize for that. My thought was, and look, why don't we do it like this? You pick the topic next time. You draw up the questions. You did say, Bill, your questions were submitted. On a failure on my part to say submit your questions, I knew we would struggle to get through the budget itself in an hour and a half, is the reason I didn't say write up your questions. We had not nearly enough time to get through that budget like we needed to. What did you ask me, Tag? Where did the numbers come from? The numbers came from, with the 3 major costs, it's stated just like this charter book. It's stated in section 5.04. The information in this report was derived from the Drainage Department budget. That's what we were there.
They could not give us the information. They told us they didn't know.
Tag, what I have on page
There was
2.
no accounting. So you
I
did the accounting and took page 2 and just put numbers together. And expect for, and then you slipped it into Jan's hand and she distributed it.
I slipped it.
Well, it was emailed
Yeah.
Well, that's what I mean.
during the daytime,
That-
but
that's-
I thought when I saw
that's what I mean.
subcommittee, I assumed it was a
Everybody had
subcommittee.
input in it.
So Mark, let me say this as the chair. You know, I learned something to ask questions, and all I'm questioning about now, if you went to the budget, I respect that, but conclusions of a subcommittee need to be discussed, vetted, and I know Stuart was talking about how difficult it is to write these reports, whether it's a one-meeting report or our committee's final conclusions, but I don't want to see it where you're defaulting, saying, well, you do it next time. Y'all are a committee, you're a subcommittee.
Understood.
And we trust you. We trust all of you to do this, and I'm hoping this is a learning experience. I don't know how many more times y'all are going to meet, but if and when you do, it needs to be a subcommittee and not one person. Otherwise, we would have just said, Mark, go to town.
Oh, I'm sorry, go
Well,
ahead.
no, I'm just saying, I want this to remain a respectful process. because
Yeah,
we're
I
all-
agree. I
We're
agree.
all giving, I think, because we care. And I wish we could listen to the tape. I wish we could go back and listen to it.
It's an
I've
hour,
messed
yeah.
up before on my podcast. I understand how the record button doesn't always work. But I feel like we need to go back and kind of resuscitate what happened and have this report conclude what the 3 of you
Yeah.
say happened. And it sounds like some of these conclusions about the city of Lafayette derived benefit from a city sales tax, we've already heard that that's not even what I don't think we need to be making legal conclusions. Y'all were just supposed to be finding out where is money spent and what percentages, is the city benefiting to the extent that they're paying in, is what I thought this was going to be.
Well, I think 2 things. First of all, I was under the assumption that that our subcommittee report was just going to illuminate the people on the committee about what happened, okay? Not making any judgments about this or that or whatever, just this is what happened because they were not there. So that was number 1. Number 2, when the director of drainage and the director of public works are sitting across the table, and I ask them a question, can you track these things? And they say no, I have to take them on their word. So that's, I guess that's what I remember from the meeting, asking them questions, and they didn't, they basically said they couldn't track it. They're the experts, I got to go with them.
So Mark, you have,
I
have
have
ideas on how
reservations
to-
about whether I even, look, guys, I see a lot of distrust in this whole process. Obviously, we have differing, I am basically told your report stinks. That's fine. I think we need another, I think I need to back down from this. I'm not going to fight this battle. I'm not going to, it's enough staying up with the information that comes across. I take it very seriously. I read it 2 and 3 times. What you got from me, granted, I gave the apology up front that I should have said, what do you want to add to the report? What you got there is factual. If you want to take out, no, it's not tag, it's fiction. I made it all up. So look, if I did, hold on, let me finish and I'll be through. Since I did such a poor job, find another subcommittee chair. I resign.
I'd like to give you time to think about that before you resign. We can accept your resignation. I don't want you to do this.
I don't know
In the
how to
heat of
do
the
anything
moment.
other than factual. I actually took a comment to mean to hear. I inferred from what I heard, you made it up. That, folks, what you've got is hours of work and study. Nothing is fictional. For every error you find, I'll give you $1
Mark,
when you go back through the numbers.
Mark, please.
Well, we
No
got
one's
to
saying you
learn to
didn't.
work together. Bill, I'd like to see, how many pages was your critique?
That's a strange
3 or 4?
You need to learn how to work together.
It was 2.
That's a very,
We can, but tag.
Mark, this,
I took offense to some things that were said. What I heard was I made it up.
this is what I'm saying.
Uh-huh.
We do not have the factual evidence to back up your numbers. The budget is what was prepared by the administration, which is very complex and confusing to everybody, including the auditors. So how can you give us a clear, definitive bottom line number?
It's called hard work and study.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and you don't trust it. So see, how can, the trust is already not there, Jan. Look, I knew we were going to reach a point at some point with this committee because we have,
This is the
it's
first-
personalities and, yeah.
Was the scope of the meeting for you to prepare a report based on your study of the budget, or was it to go to the department heads and let them share what happens? That's what I'm not clear
Yeah.
on what you're saying, because if you had to spend hours doing this and they didn't give you all the numbers that you needed, I think that's where the
They
subcommittee's
did
saying.
give me, it's called page 206,
I know, but we
207,
all
and
have
208.
that. You were there, you didn't have to meet with them if you could have just looked at
No,
the
because I
budget.
didn't understand Fund 273 and Fund 261 and Fund 401. I needed that clarity. And the 2 gentlemen in the meeting asked their questions, and some good questions. But the focus had to be the drainage department. I got asked, well, where are those pages? We can't address the public works. If I do continue, and I will take some time and let it cool down. And it's up to you guys. Because what I take away from today, and look, it's nothing personal. I got pretty broad shoulders. I took a lot of critique here today. Criticism, let us call us what it is. And if I can't please somebody, I gave it my best shot. Obviously, if there's no trust there and people think I made it up, I can't fight that battle. Of course they gave the number, they were right in front of us, page 206, 207, and 208. I asked for clarity of that budget and you can look at my notes, they're in this blue notebook, and I defined the things that I didn't understand. You guys asked some questions as well, but my understanding, and we agreed, I think, is even as a committee, let's start with the drainage department budget.
Okay, conversely, they need to trust also.
I know.
And I don't want to be a referee here. It's a committee of volunteers that love our community. But they were blindsided by me because I sent out this email not knowing that they didn't have input on it. And obviously, your recollections differ, or your perceptions of what happened. And I want this to be a subcommittee that works together.
Me
And
too.
so we're a little hot right now. We can't vote on this because it wasn't the work of the subcommittee. I think I'm just going to ask if you fellows can read this, and you've already got some written comments, and I know that TAG did too. If y'all can come up with something that doesn't draw a conclusion, but looks at what was actually presented to you. Does that make sense? Because you went through and studied the budget, but that isn't what I'm hearing happened at the meeting. They weren't able to say what percentage of work was done.
I'm willing to give it another shot. My suggestion would be take out the conclusion, and we, as a group, rewrite that.
Let me say as we move forward, we only enter into reports factual information that can be backed up. The budget is a complex, confusing document that even the auditors admit. So I'm wondering, how can anyone make a definitive conclusion? I know you've burnt the midnight oil with what you had to work with, but what you had to work with was questioned at Public Works, and we did not get an answer, other than go buy a $150 book.
I have a question. Does this finance subcommittee, whenever we meet as three people, it has to be advertised?
It does.
It does, okay, all right. So is it possible to advertise something at a day that is convenient for all of us at the main library, and we three just sit down and we talk about whatever we're going to talk about?
That's possible, Bill, but, you know, in kind of looking at this exchange, just go left. Let me just suggest, and I mean, it's completely up to you, that any subcommittee meetings can always be held here. We have the recording technology to where, you know, you'd be able to go back and review everything, anything that would be in dispute, or, you know, just anything that needs to be reconciled. So I would strongly suggest that. You know, certainly the Finance Subcommittee meeting was a daytime meeting. We have staff available for that here at City Hall. Anything that would need to happen after hours, you know, that would be few and far between for the drafting committee. You know, I'd be able to stay, another staff member would be able to stay. So I just think that that would provide a solution to any inconsistencies that you know, are between the three of you guys. That's just a suggestion to try to keep this committee intact.
Okay, thank you. And I think just as a final suggestion, that all three of us bend over backwards to meet a high level of inclusion, and that none of us, for whatever reason, decide to take it upon ourselves to, I guess, overstep our boundaries. Inclusion would be the most important word for me, to include all three of us as often as possible so that we can get our job done and be able to present something to the drafting committee in a timely fashion.
My question from the second heading down, I don't remember, I put away my info. And I just heard it, again, I don't want to keep kicking this dead horse, but I just heard the information I produced called fictional. Not factual is a double negative, meaning it's fictional. So do you two gentlemen deem those numbers, that numbers breakdown, relevant to what we would have been doing as studying the drainage department budget? Are they instructive for our committee?
Well, again, I think my perception of what we were supposed to do at the Drainage Committee meeting, to ask questions, to see if we can get some answers, and then to present the findings to the rest of this committee. And some of the information that you gave to Jan and she emailed out was not discussed there. So, or at least not in that context, maybe in some kind of broad thing, but I certainly do not remember ever discussing with everyone there the numbers that you put down. I'm not saying that they're not factual. We didn't discuss it.
I've said enough. Thank you. You guys can email me. We can talk. I don't know if this report dies. I don't know if it's revised. I don't know. We'll play it by ear.
Would you like for me to email you my?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Why don't you suggest, do you want me to include the whole thing, Bill?
Well, I at least want you to have it so that if you have any comments about your recollection of the meeting, that you can certainly give your opinion that, yes, we talked about this, no, we didn't talk about that. So I want you to have it so that you can review it. And what you do with it after that is purely up to you.
Okay. Well, see, my thinking differs because I think the breakdown of that number, what was the highest cost in the budget? Personnel. I think that's very relevant to what we're doing here as we gather information from numerous departments. Second thing, contractual services, followed by, I think that's relevant information. You guys don't. If we're going to constantly have a differing point of view, can we bring it together and make it work together? I don't know.
Right.
It's not looking very good right now because I was obviously way off base.
Well, when you mentioned personnel, am I correct that in the drainage department, 100% of personnel is paid for by parish funds?
Yes, it was parish funds.
Gotcha. Okay. And that's
And that was in there,
right.
if you recall.
Exactly right. And obviously there's no discrepancy there. That's where it is. Okay. I think what I'm looking for by being on this committee is if the city of Lafayette pays 60% of that person's salary, is the city of Lafayette getting 60% of the benefit? And just as important, if the other 40% of the parish, municipalities and unincorporated areas, if they're paying 40%, are they getting 40% of the benefit? Those two things are equal to me.
May I suggest that you word that and send it to me and say, maybe look at what you've got, knock it down to what you think is most important?
Right.
Okay, I don't know that the report said we asked to know, find out do they track their cars, and the answer is no. I don't know that that's relevant to the budget. They can track the equipment that was used. Yes, city money was spent. I think this is what I recommend. Send me what you've got. We'll knock out the whole conclusion part, and we'll put summary. And if you have any comments as well, send them to me, please. And but here's the deal. Not just because it's a lot of hard work, I think it's very relevant. If you guys say page 2 is irrelevant to the budget, understanding the drainage department budget, I don't know that I can live with that. My disagreement will be so pronounced that I will say, find another third person. I'd like to keep working with you guys.
Mark, I'm saying the conclusion that you came to, you cannot back that up.
We have a comment from Pat Lewis.
Yes, Jan, I think we need to just move forward, and I think all subcommittees, now I know subcommittees should be working together. So if you have any questions as far as Bill and Mark, what you guys are talking about, getting the reports together, you guys can have that conversation. But for the sake of the committee, just move forward and let's try to work together as much as we can. And that's all I have to say right now.
Thank you. I didn't expect all this to be taking place, and I want you guys to be able to communicate, but I want to see our committees work together and give us what we need. So I don't have anything else. V, while you were gone, we talked about our next meeting, reaching out to Andrew Duyon and Don Bertrand about the LUS and LUS fiber questions. Does anyone else have anything to add?
Are you still looking at the allocation cost consultant too?
I know you've sent that out there. Have you gotten
I
information?
haven't gotten a reply as of yet, though, but,
I think we would like to ask them questions.
and we could, if they want to come in, it could be via Zoom.
Right.
So,
Would
but
that
I'll
work?
keep you guys posted, and if you want it for this meeting, maybe we could reschedule them or whatnot, but I'm not even sure yet.
Okay.
Whether or not they're going to confirm.
We would see it on the screen? We would see them on each of our screens?
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
All right. If there's no other business, meeting's adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Well, sorry it went so long. It's never going to get better.